I don't know if this has happened to anyone else, but I still can't believe that it happened to me. I don't even know if this is anything paranormal, but in 2016, I was spending a week in Springfield in that area because I was on break from school. My parents wanted me to come with them to my cousin's house. They live in northern Arkansas, not too far away. Now I like my cousins, but who I really like is their dog, Lysander. He's a big fluffy Malamute husky mix and one of the prettiest dogs I've ever seen. He's always so excited to see me. So my second day there, I decided to go for a hike with him. My uncle wanted me to take a gun in case I ran into a quote crazy, but I'm from Illinois in the suburbs, so I've never shot one in my whole life. I tell him that I'll be fine. I'm a big girl now, and Lysa will protect me. He agrees, but tells me to stay on the trail. I drive out to a trailhead that I find online. It's a beautiful, mountainous region. This is northern Arkansas, so it's below freezing, but totally manageable. The snow is just brushing the ground. I'm walking at a great pace. The air is fresh. I'm throwing sticks for Lysa. The trees are getting thicker. I know that I'm never going to break a tree line or anything because these aren't big mountains. The brush is so thick that a lot of this ground doesn't even really have snow. There's lots of exposed roots, shadows, rocky boulders in the stream beds and such. It's pretty quiet, except for a few birds. Lysa is jumping around, extremely happy. Suddenly, he freezes. He stops and sniffs the air. I can tell that he's got something on his nose. He seems a little paralyzed. I suddenly feel nervous, even though I try to brush it off as normal. I mean, he is a dog. He looks confused and starts padding around, but is super alert. Then, his ears perk up, and a low growl starts in his throat. I stand behind him. What is it, buddy? His back arches like a cat, and he stands in front of me, still softly growling. I've never seen him do this before. I can literally see his fight or flight reaction working. Flight wins out. He turns and starts to nudge me into the brush off the trail. I trust him, so I follow, but I'm genuinely scared now. Crazy hill people fears and whatnot. He's not growling anymore, but looks confused and alert again, and leads me into this little hollow a ways up the hill from the trail. There, he starts to scan the landscape, and that's when I see it. I crouch down, scared out of my mind, but peering through the branches in front of me. It's a bear, but a really huge one, lumbering through the woods. I know that I'm probably not in any danger because bears don't usually attack humans, but this one is huge. I didn't even know that bears were in this area. I'm cursing myself for not bringing a gun. Then, I start to notice that this bear is walking a bit funny. It's still a ways off, and the branches are hiding it, but it looks like it's swaying from side to side with each step, as if it's drunk, or staggering, or dragging something, almost like its arms are too long for its legs. When it gets closer, I see that it's definitely not a bear, or at least not a normal one. The forearms look way more like a human in proportions, and its fur looks more like a buffalo or a mountain goat or something. Although its back looks like a bear, its neck is longer, and it has a tail. I've never seen a bear with a tail. It's kind of wagging too, sweeping back and forth. Lysa is dead silent, still on alert, but clearly just as scared as I am. The bear thing is rummaging around, getting closer, but for something that big and ungraceful, it's really quiet. Like, it definitely should be making more noise than it is. Lysa starts to move, and I grab him by the collar and put an arm around him, begging him to keep quiet. It's too late. He barks, and really loud, and a really mean one, and the bear thing looks up quickly. I can't even describe the face that well. It's like this fat, furry bear-moose hybrid, small eyes, and these weird lip things. It has these small ears, and they shoot up as it's looking up the hill right at me. I'm still holding Lyso, and I'm starting to pray at this point. Then the bear thing slowly starts to stand up. My heart skips a beat. It's way bigger than I thought it was, and its arms are so terrifyingly long for its body. I let go of Lyso. He bolts down the hill, teeth baring and barking like crazy. The thing looks confused and scared and turns around and starts to hightail it back the way it came. It's running this weird long-armed bear gallop, breaking branches, but still super quiet with its footsteps. I run down the hill after it as Lyso chases it away. 30 seconds later, he comes back and licks my hand. I'm totally shaken. We get back on the trail and head back to my car. What the hell was that? When I got home, my family believed me, but I had a hard time explaining it. My dad and uncle think that it was a bear with some kind of severe deformity, like a growth hormone gene gone wrong or something, that ruined its bone structure. My dad said that there's bears up there in the mountains that can be subject to inbreeding, and maybe that was one of them that got messed up. But my uncle told me later that there are other things that are up there in the mountains that look like bears, but aren't bears. I don't know what I saw, but I honestly think I saw maybe a Bigfoot or a dogman or something like that. When it stood up on its hind legs, its silhouette could definitely pass for a furry primate, and it was huge. It's really my first time ever even talking about this, but what do you think it was? So this was not something that I witnessed personally, but instead one that my grandmother told me that my aunt later corroborated independently, so I think it's trustworthy. At the time, I'll note that there wasn't much talk of dogmen or werewolves, and this was about a decade before the infamous song came out. Although people did hear talk of wolves or werewolf-like monsters in Appalachia for a long time, so my aunt and grandmother just always called it the wolf thing. For a little background about my grandparents is currently my aunt's home. It's in the backwoods of western Grayson County, Virginia, which to this day is still sparsely populated, outside of one or two large towns on the east side, and back then, even less so. It was extremely thick forest, and still is, with hilly terrain in all directions. You have to get on a dirt path and follow it for about half a mile to get to a gravel-covered side road, and then follow that for about 30 minutes to reach a very small town just across the North Carolina border. As you can imagine, there would be a lot of wildlife in the area. A typical morning for my grandmother was making breakfast and sitting out on her porch, watching deer and rabbits eat at the shrubs. Sometimes she would also see or hear a bobcat, fox, or coyote about. On one occasion, a mountain lion and her cubs strolled right past the house. One animal she was familiar with in particular was a very, very large black bear who could be recognized by folks around those parts from a white patch on his chest and a hole in his left ear. My grandmother nicknamed him Captain because he had a habit of sitting on his haunches and reaching up with his paws to pick at apples, a motion that looked like he was saluting. Captain was a very big black bear, but he wasn't aggressive unless tested. He seemed to have an agreement with my grandmother and grandfather that if they left him alone, he would leave them alone. He would just stroll by the house every now and then to have some blackberries on the bushes or apples that had fallen down, which meant that he came by the house's yards often, as he was too big to climb trees much more, and the fruit trees around the house were low enough that he could reach up and pick food. My grandfather guesstimated that he was somewhere in the 500 to 600 pound range and roughly 6 feet tall, as my grandfather once measured scratch marks that he left on a tree. During this week, my grandmother noticed a very sharp decline in the animals nearby. It was the latter part of summer in a wet season, so most of the plants were in full bloom, and the leaves were all at their tenderest. Yet, she couldn't see the hide nor hair of any rabbits, deer, or anything coming to graze. A coyote that she had seen yapping every night for the past month just vanished. A few neighbors, by neighbors I mean people who lived within 5 miles, who stopped by, also told her that something had taken their dog and their chicken coop had been smashed into. They assumed that a mountain lion was lurking around. It had been around before, and they figured that that was what had done it, since it was the only thing that could feasibly take down a large farm dog. And not only that, they had seen Captain, the only other predator nearby, big enough to take down an 80-pound farm dog, in a whole other part of the area, gorging himself on a deer. They checked around and couldn't find anything. The next night, my grandmother was woken up by my aunt, who told her that she heard something bang against the outside of her wall. They checked around in the morning and found one of the deer that was butchered with a bloody smear on the wall. Judging from the way the gravel was disturbed, the deer had been walking by the house when something ambushed it, and in the struggle, it got smacked against the wall. My grandmother, having grown up in the woods, was familiar with predator kills and methods. Mountain lions tend to jump on the back and rake their claws across the flanks to hold on as they bite the neck. Black bears will usually break the neck or the back with their paws while biting the head, and the rare occasions coyotes attack deer, they usually do it by biting down on the inside of the leg and twisting to rip the muscle and arteries. But this kill clearly had the throat ripped out, but there weren't any claw marks to be found, and the bite looked narrower than what a cougar would do. Plus, she could gander there was only one predator from the way the ground had been disturbed, which didn't make sense for coyotes, as they typically hunted in pairs, since just one alone usually isn't enough to bring down a fully grown deer. After disposing of the carcass, the next few nights were relatively uneventful, except for the fact that several times my aunt or grandmother would be woken up in the middle of the night by the sound of something panting outside. Now, in these woods you can hear a pin drop if it's close enough at some point. They could swear the animal making the panting was directly outside the wall. One day my grandmother was picking some berries when she noticed what looked like dog tracks of a very large hound going through a mud flat bordering the nearby stream. And when she looked back, she saw the very distinctly canine face in much greater detail, because the animal had moved out from under cover, but instead of stepping out of the leaves like she thought it would at first, she soon noticed that it was instead standing up on its hind legs and peering over the shrubs. Now, she had seen canines standing upright before. Dogs do it, foxes can do it, coyotes sometimes do it. It was the size that took her off guard. She had been to that exact same thicket of shrubs just the other day, and her head only just barely reached the top, and my grandmother was about 5'3". This thing had its head pitched clear over the shrubs with a little extra visible, and usually when a predator is making no attempt to hide, it's usually because it's trying to intimidate someone. My grandmother managed to back away to the hill without turning around, and then when she started to get out of sight, the creature stepped out of the thicket on its hind legs. It strolled forward in a very uncanny way she had trouble describing, but she insisted and never went back down on all fours. Needless to say, she ran to the house in a backpedal sprint. That night, they heard the panting again, along with a distant howl and scraping sounds. They found the garage door, the back door frame, and the kitchen window frame all had claw marks on them from something investigating them. The canine creature was seen a few more times across that week by my grandmother and the neighbors, usually on or near the area of my family's property. My aunt finally saw it when she saw a pair of fuzzy ears outside of her window. Now she wasn't startled right off the bat, as Captain had come by her window a few times before, and she gradually lost some fear of the big bear over the years. But in his case, his ears just barely reached the edge of the windowsill, whereas in this case, you could clearly see them and the top of their owner's head. She quickly realized it wasn't the bear because of the pointed shape, the brown coloring, and the fact it had two fully intact ears. They also started to detect a very pungent smell on a side door porch. One time, finding what looked like urine or some other liquid stains on it, suggesting that an animal had scent marked it to claim the spot. It all came to a head on a Wednesday night when they heard howling in the distance grow closer. My grandmother flipped on the porch light and glimpsed the canine animal quickly sprinting across the lawn on its hind legs again. Her sighting confirmed how big it was. She'd seen timber wolves at the zoo up to 150 pounds, but she was certain that this was much more than twice its size. For several hours of the night, they could hear it roaming around the property and pressing against the doors like it was trying to find a way in. They glimpsed at several points the shine of yellow eyes peering in through the windows, as well as broad, long-fingered paws being pushed against the glass briefly. This was the day and age before cell phones and 24-hour police service in some rural areas, so no one had means to immediately call the police. Instead, my grandmother had to wait arduous minutes on a dial line, with difficulty trying to call the police station 2 towns over. She was distracted by my aunt screaming and running into the bedroom to try and get some of the guns out. She had been sitting in the living room when she felt clicking against the glass, and then she saw, quote, that wolf thing pressing its face and bared teeth against the surface with its claws fully outstretched. Both of them started to try to get out rifles, shotguns, anything. It was becoming increasingly clear that the creature was trying to get into the house and knew that they were in there. They heard it once again panting through a wall, before there was the sound of heavy footsteps and a very loud thump. With a flash of fur on the edge of the window, they ran to the innermost room, the pantry locker, and stayed in there with guns. Now, it's not like in the movies when creatures roar, snarl, and hiss constantly, no matter what they're doing, but they did hear a commotion outside. My aunt and grandmother hadn't the faintest idea what was going on, and didn't investigate until the morning after, but they could tell something was antagonizing something, as occasional grunts, barks, and rumbles were audible through the blackness for about a minute, and then gradually moved off. They found no bodies, but there'd clearly been a ferocious altercation. The ground was ripped up in multiple spots, the wall had a dent in it, and there were some oxidized blood traces on the grass and dirt. My grandmother also found a trail where something had charged through the shrubs and recovered several vague dog prints, as well as wider tracks moving in the same direction. The animals all seemed to come back by the end of the week, and all of the howls stopped. When my grandfather came back home, he, my aunt, and some neighbors surveyed the area to make sure they couldn't find this wolf creature. Evidently, the neighbors had also heard howls around their property at night that stopped recently as well. They couldn't find it despite surveying the whole property, though they did find what looked like a track leading out of the property and running off into the mountains. Several days later, my grandmother saw Captain again, marking his territory by rubbing up against a tree in their yard and scratching the bark. He had several cuts across his muzzle. He was missing patches of fur. He had some healing bite wounds on his arm, and the hole in his ear had been torn open to the fact that he was missing half the ear flap. Other than that, and a slight limp that went away with time, he was fine. My aunt joked that he looked rather proud of himself. When he was told about the urine-like smell on the doorstep when the wolf creature was there running amok, My grandfather speculated that it was trying to claim the territory. Usually black bears are relatively docile, but evidently Captain took issue with this newcomer imposing on his space and became aggressive. So what my grandmother and aunt heard that night was the bear charging at it while it was distracted and trying to get in the house. While the wolf-looking creature was taller, it seemed skinnier and less massive, and apparently, in a confrontation and threat display that likely followed, sheer bulk won out. Apparently it decided it wasn't worth claiming the spot if it meant having to square off with a quarter-ton of claws and teeth for it. Captain had run the intruder off to protect his territory and coincidentally helped my family. As a thank you, and so he could recover his strength quicker, my grandmother trimmed the apple trees to down all the fruit and let the bear enjoy himself without feeding him directly. We don't want to associate humans with food. Winter would be in a few months, and she wanted him fattened up so he could stick around for the next year, just in case. And as she put it, the forest will always have a boss, and it's better to have one who's not interested in eating you. Decades have gone by, and while both of my grandparents and Captain have passed, the dogman creature never returned. There's been about 3 black bears who have moved into Captain's place since, and each of them has grown to be about as big as he was. Thankfully, that seems to have been enough to ward off any large canine creatures. So a little bit about how I ended up in this situation. When I was 7 years old, my mom unfortunately passed away. My dad was declared unfit due to a severe addiction to painkillers. I ended up living with my uncle Eric, his wife, and my cousin Jeremy. So fast forward 11 years. I was 18, Jeremy was 20. I just graduated from high school. Jeremy tells us that he's rented a trailer for the 2 of us and our girlfriends. I ask where. He tells me it's on Vancouver Island. We get on the ferry and get to our trailer. He tells us that he's been planning this whole trip for a while now as a big graduation present. We're set to be there for 2 weeks. We have our trailer parked in a pretty secluded and heavily wooded area. The first 4 nights are absolutely uneventful, but fun. We swam in a nearby lake. We roasted food over the fire. We dicked around in nature and hiked. It was a good time. Around the 5th day or so, my girlfriend, Sam, comes running to us one morning. She's scared and pale. I ask her what happened. She said that there was someone in the bushes. I ask her if she saw anything, any identifiable factors. She tells me no, but that it was definitely a person. Throughout the day, there does seem to be this aura of us being watched, not with a malicious intent, mind you, but not a friendly feeling either. As the day goes on, the feeling of being watched is not able to be shaken off. There's times when it feels less noticeable, if that's what you could call it, but it felt like the eyes in the woods were simply not paying that much attention during those times. So, fast forward to that night, we set up the pit to make dinner. We're right in the middle of eating when suddenly there's this very faint noise. It's rocks being smacked together. It's almost undeniably the sound of rocks being hit against each other, but it's so far off. It's creepy enough that Sam bolts for the inside of the trailer and locks herself in. At some point in the night, Jeremy's girlfriend Hannah decides it's her turn to go to bed as well. After that, Jeremy asks me if I want to go out into the woods to explore the source of the noise. I tell him that that could be very dangerous. He tells me that that's part of the fun. He shows me that he packed a shotgun just in case of wild animals. We take our flashlights and head off into the woods. Now it was very quiet, but not the kind of everything stops quiet, just like an eerie silence, kind of silence where you're waiting in anticipation for something to happen. We explore for a good 15 to 30 minutes and find Pretty much nothing. We head back, disappointed. Once we get back to the trailer, we head in and sit down for a bit, when something does happen. A loud smack against the side of the trailer. We go out to see what happened. There's a huge-ass rock that got thrown at the side of the trailer. Jeremy and I shine lights into the immediate area, but we don't see anything. But there is the very obvious rustling of bushes and branches being snapped. Someone is running away. The next day comes. We head out into the woods again. Jeremy is still armed. We head for the direction where we heard the branches being snapped. Whoever it was that was out there just straight annihilated some bushes, like ran straight through them. At this point, I want to not go any further. Jeremy tells me that he'll go and find whoever's out there if I'm too scared. I try and reason with him, like what if it's some crazy person in the woods? We argue a bit, and I head back to the trailer. A good 45 minutes to an hour passes, and I hear someone running. But this time, it's Jeremy, and he's hauling ass. Jeremy fumbles as he's running inside. He's the palest I've ever seen him. He's aiming his shotgun from the inside and shaking. It's a few hours of tension as he seems to be waiting for what he ran from. After he's sure that who or whatever he was running from didn't follow, he's still rattled, breathing heavily. I asked him what happened out in the woods. He says, "Dude, something tried to grab me." I repeated, "Grab you?" He tells me that he only got the glimpse of a person, a big person too, as its hands were massive. He could feel the fingers draping over his shoulder. For reference, we are both 6'2". The grip almost tightened when he jumped back in panic and bolted as fast as he could run. He never got a good look at the face, but this person to him was quite tall, at least a foot or two above him at his estimate. The girls are frightened. I'm frightened. And Jeremy just keeps looking out the window to see if it came back to follow him. But nothing comes, and this goes on until we anxiously make dinner. Jeremy keeps the shotgun on him at all times now. Every little noise that he hears, there's a cause for him to start aiming. At one point, a small bird made a noise, and he obliterated it with the gun at point-blank range. But I digress. We're eating. Still no activity. It's around 1:30 to 2 a.m. now, roughly, when we're all woken up by this sound. Someone is howling, or screaming, or something. It's more like a bellow. This lasts a few minutes, and then stops. There's some intermittent hollers as well. The hollers are short and high-pitched. The bellows are deeper. This continues on and off throughout the night. About a full week into our trip, we're terrified, scared, and ready to just go. It's this night that something new starts happening. The sound of something hard being smacked against a tree. Jeremy's educated guess is that it's some kind of large piece of wood, like a branch. This thwacking sound is harsh and violent. There's no way you couldn't hear it. Jeremy snaps off a branch of his own to start responding. The thwacking goes back and forth between the two of them for a bit, maybe 3 hours. After all of that, nothing. We're all unable to sleep that night. It's been about 2 days after that, and nothing has happened. We think that maybe we talked it out. This would turn out to not be the case. It's late one night, and we're preparing for bed when we start hearing some noise. It's rocks. Rocks of various sizes being pelted against the trailer. Jeremy grabs his shotgun and heads out, just itching to shoot at something. He starts shooting randomly. It doesn't seem like he ever hit anything. The rock pelting keeps going on for over an hour, stops, and then resumes. Like the bellows, this is also an off and on occurrence. The next morning, we start looking to see where this person could be hiding this entire time. We're not expecting to see it. There's this huge, fur-covered person, I guess. It's about our size, and it's staring us dead on. Jeremy lines himself up to shoot it. Not sure how or why, but he misses the shot. We get a holler for our trouble before it runs off into the woods. We tell the girls what happened. They're obviously freaked the hell out. Night comes, and like the nights before, there's violent thwacking of branches against trees. It's loud, and it's angry sounding. I say out loud, "Hey Jeremy, I think we pissed it off." The knocking stops. For some reason, we're absolutely scared shitless. After a few hours of complete silence, we hear a massive thud, and another, and then another. It's more rocks, bigger ones too. All four of us head out, Jeremy armed with a shotgun. The girls and I have flashlights. That's when Sam screams bloody murder. She bolts faster than a track star, her way back inside. Jeremy tries to take a shot. I grab the light that she dropped. He's massive, taller than the one that we saw in the daytime. The best I could compare it to is if you added a few inches to someone like Shaq. With what brief glimpse I got of its face, it's snarling, like it's pissed. My only thought is, shit, there's two of them. One smaller, and the bigger one. Those are the only two we can see, or the ones we know of. The larger one is bold enough to show itself. We do not sleep at all the next few nights. It's our last night before we go back. It's peaceful and quiet. We're all suspicious. As we're packing our stuff and leaving, we see the larger one in broad daylight. Just a brief few seconds though. It stares us down as we leave. We all get back home, and the first thing that me and Jeremy do, because our house is kinda in the woods, is lock all the doors out of fear. Me and Jeremy still had sleepless nights for months after that. Every little sound startled the hell out of us. The girls were like this too. A few years after what happened, Jeremy got into Sasquatch research. He's determined to shoot one. Me and Sam stayed together and eventually got married. Despite what all happened, I still enjoy the outdoors. I just carry a firearm on me now, and a knife, in the event that I see one of those things again, even though I hope not to. So this next one was sent in by Big Bird, so I hope I can do your story justice. When I was a kid, my brother and cousin and I were wandering in the hills. We came upon an area that felt like the rest of the land, but we noticed a cave on the hillside. My cousin and I checked it out even after my brother's protests. There were small footprints and what looked like miniature horse hoof tracks going into it. I remember we even found droppings that looked like horse manure, but it was different at the back of the cave. The cave sort of domed out and had a dirt floor, but it was like it was a stable, but there was nowhere to go. There were tracks going in, but none out. After the cave, we continued our wanderings, and we came across this spot that looked like the highway, like a familiar spot that we thought we knew on the way toward town. Knowing this, it was far for us considering how young we were. But as we contemplated going further or turning back, we noticed that there was no traffic, and it was oddly quiet. Not only that, there was no sound at all, no sound of jake brakes, not even the sound of wildlife. So we turned back, past the cave, and went toward home. But then something happened. We somehow got lost, despite being in this area many times. We even ended up coming back to the cave area, despite walking in a straight line. I got scared after a while, but we made a little fire and roasted marshmallows and drank water to calm down. We were all worried, but I think me freaking out and being the youngest made them all keep composure long enough until we could make it home. During that time in the loop, which is what I felt like it was, the sun stayed in the same spot in the sky. There wasn't any wind that I can recall. However, after we stopped to collect ourselves, we drank our water, and I poured some out as an offering. They laughed at me for thinking that marshmallows and water would be a good enough offering for the spirits. I don't know if we left those or not, but it seemed right, and after that, everything came back. We could hear the road again, and everything else. Gathering our bearings, we set home, walking in the same direction that we always had been, and the same direction that we kept coming back full circle. So it was scary, but we said we'd try it again. We went through the same little thick of trees once again, and as we were making it through, things began to look familiar again. Getting excited, we sort of ran, but stopped ourselves, just so it wasn't being disrespectful, and not to show fear. As we trekked along, the sound of semis echoing through the hills got stronger, and we were able to pinpoint exactly where we were. We came out on a hill that was far off, looking down west on our community. I remember the sun was still out. I wanted to go right down and straight home, but they wanted to go around on top toward this coulee where we were originally going to explore that day. Recharged from seeing home, we went on, and quickly, I remember I didn't care to explore, more of just wanted to walk through because we were out of water. When we came out the draw and into the field, home was closer, and I was anxious to get there, but my cousin stopped us, saying not to mention what happened or the cave to anyone. I think we even picked cedar and smudged ourselves off. At the time, we all noticed that it was now dark, like the sky was painted bluish purple and oranges and yellow hues from the setting sun. But it wasn't like that just 10 minutes before when we were looking down on our community. It was a weird chilling feeling, like maybe we weren't actually home yet at all, or those spirits were still playing a trick on us. So we called our names because that is something we were always told to do when wandering in the hills. So we did, and we walked into our neighborhood. About a week later, we were going back out into the hills, but we all looked at each other. Nothing was said about it. We just knew that we weren't going to go in that area or near it again. Now, I grew up in this area my whole life, and that means those hills as well. This is years later, so I was out on my own. I had a few of my dogs, a pint of whiskey, some pills, and a lot of weed. I planned to go out for a day in the hills with some of my friends, and we'd have fun on my day off. Something we talked about doing a few days prior, but on the day, they were too hungover from the night before, and the others didn't want to go because it was warmer than expected. I tried to convince some of them, but they wouldn't budge. They just said, "We can do all that stuff here at my friend's house," but I didn't want to, for a few reasons. First, we had planned a day out, since I was working a lot and holding 5 jobs down that summer. And this is in rural Montana, so it's easy for an eager guy to get work when willing. It also helped that my part-time job was a fill-in at the local casino, and my priority was a wildland firefighter. The other one was one of my own gigs as a handyman contractor, a ranch hand, and sometimes a bartender on my lazy Sundays. And the other reason was that they didn't share their drinks when I stopped by the night before, when they were talking about how fun our day in the hills was going to be. And lastly, one of the guys that stayed at my friend's house was a worthless person, a dumb-as-hell wannabe rapper that just mooched off everyone, and he always liked to fight with me, ever since we were kids. He was a good friend of mine, and then one day he just started fighting me and challenging me after he met my cousin. I think maybe it's because he thought he was cool, so I just went out alone. First, I just hiked up some good steep hills to get the blood pumping for the goodies, and then stopped for refreshments. I was just out wandering with my dogs under a bright sunny day, thinking it must suck for my friends because it was nice and cool with the wind and all the shaded areas that I was trekking. I was feeling good from my cocktail of whiskey and pills, smoking my joints. I walked about 2 to 3 miles back and forth up and down the hills in my area, finding myself up on a high point with a nice ledge to perch on. I sat there, looking out on the landscape. I was thinking about some jobs that I wanted to do, and I was clearing my schedule for them. And then I thought, why am I thinking about work? I'm out here to get away from all that. So I just stopped thinking and just sat there, not a sense in my head, when I realized something, how quiet it was. The wind had died down, and I couldn't hear the highway anymore. I didn't even hear my dogs panting or them doing dog things. I was laying back with my eyes closed, so I sat up to look around, and still I could hear nothing. I got up to look around and called for my dogs. I didn't really get worried yet. I was more thinking, whoa, this is crazy. It just gets like this sometimes out here, but not hearing my dogs bark when I would call for them was definitely odd. After a minute or two, I just left it and figured if they got tired or thirsty, they might have made off for home and will wander back out if or when they please. They are res dogs after all. And when left to their own devices, they were out in the hills a lot. You were able to see their paths going up the hill behind my house. I was just unbothered when most people would probably freak out. Having everything just go quiet and finding yourself more alone than you already thought you were. The sounds of nature and the highway being gone was odd. As I walked down the hill, it brought back this memory. I was making my way down the hill toward a back road that led to my neighborhood when my dog popped out from the other side of it, looking like she had just had herself a squirrel or something. I asked her where the others were. She just looked back where she came, so I figured I haven't been down this way in a long time, but I knew it well, hence me thinking that they were having a buffet at a huge squirrel town. There was a few trees whose bases were buried with years of pine cones piled up with networks of holes in them as their stores, and the trees in that spot all showing signs of constant traffic. When you're there, and they're feeling lively, they'll throw pine cones at you, or sticks. Some of them even feel brave enough to run at you and rip at your pants. That's how much they want to show you that this place is their spot. On our way down, I told my dog to take me to the others, and she did. As we go, I noticed a lot of the places flashed back to the time loop period. It was so vivid that I could remember that morning running through that area and it being brand new to me. As she led me, I was thinking, I wonder if my brothers remember this. Anywho, we found the others. They found the spring near our rodeo grounds, and I realized that this is why they would often look like they did when they came back from the hills. It was hot and had been a couple hours. I thought that I would get some water at the trough that they have out there. After getting my fill, I got it in me that I really wanted to find that place. I really wanted to go back to the cave again, and also to find that twilight area highway. I figured I have my dogs, so if anything happens and I don't get out, maybe one might, and someone can trace it back to me. So I made my peace, and I fought back the fear of those memories. After some time, I came upon the spot with the trees. They were taller now, but I knew going through them I'd find that clearing, and on the other side of it, I would see that opening with the draw to the left, and straight through the opening was another natural opening that went on toward the right, and sure as shit, when I came through that thick of trees, I saw it. Everything came back tenfold. Even worse, I was by myself, and with my dogs, but no one knew. I just hoped that my loved ones wouldn't look too long if I didn't come back. As much as memory serves me well, and instinct said to turn back, I walked on after making sure that one of my dogs were close. Passing the opening and rounding the hill down the draw was everything I remembered. I stayed out in the middle in the open. I rounded till I could see where it was. I could see the old path and where it went. I was puzzled. You can see the path and the yellowing of the area where the cave was. Past it was reddish brown, and there were bushes, just the normal stuff like the rest of the area. But where this cave was supposed to be, there was nothing. It looked just like a game trail where animals would go to graze on the hillsides. If anyone knows what I'm talking about, they'll get it. But I was sort of mad. I made it all the way here, and nothing. I even walked up the path to the spot that I knew. It felt weird. It really did feel like I was being watched from the hill across from me. But mostly, I made sure I didn't mix up the memory and what I was actually feeling. But what made me confirm it all was that my dogs did not follow me up that path, and my girl Fluffy, who was the oldest one at the time, made those whiny noises out of concern before I went up to it. And all that time, she just stayed off near that opening, down by the start of the path. The others just roamed about, but they all visibly stayed clear of that area. Wouldn't even come when I called them. They just looked at me as they drew near but kept their distance. After I went down the draw toward that highway, I remembered it wasn't far from the cave, so I figured it wouldn't be too long until I came to the narrow spot where it closed in with trees and the natural drainage area that dropped down to the ditch that showed the highway. After the cave not being there, I marched right on through. It was just like I remember, but at the point of the drainage, there was no barbed wire fence and no highway. One dog just felt like we were on our way from that spot and went about his business. At the drain, he stopped to look back at me, and I asked what he could see. If you haven't realized by now, I talk to my dogs like I do anyone, but he was like, come on. In that area, it was going out to another clearing and out to more wilderness. So I went and circled that area. Nothing. So I went back toward the cave, and it was just as I saw, but my dogs steered clear of that area. Anywhere else, they were all over the place. But that spot, it was like you could even see the bugs stay away from it. It was like a line drawn on a piece of paper, but this was no line that I could see. Two of them I watched. One always followed right after the other with their nose to the ground, and they'd follow that line, and after they got past it, they would continue on exploring. The game trails that I mentioned were more distinguishable the second time through, and I noticed that their grazing paths were starting about the same distance away from where my dogs walked. I walked up closer, directly below the cave, perpendicular from the path, and seeing that you can clearly see where animals grazed and didn't. There wasn't any cow patties in that area. Above it on the hill was too steep, so there wouldn't be many signs there. Then I realized the path stayed there because of erosion, and if they still used that cave. But it was south-facing in the sun and in the open, so it would make sense that it would still have signs of being there, but the cave itself was where it looked like it was dug out long ago, and time did its thing. There was brush right near it, but it was old and dried out at this time. Then, I just gave up and made my way back home. Before leaving the first clearing with the thicket of trees, I lit a joint and laid it on the ground as an offering. It was all I had left. It's from nature, and from nature it returned. I said a prayer and made it through after a bit back home. And after having a conversation with Big Bird, he told me a small side story, so here that is as well. One time, long ago, our parents had some family over. They were having a good time. It didn't matter because us kids got to go all have a sleepover a few houses over at my aunt's. Not long before midnight or so, my mom and aunt came over and we heard shouting. Think something had gone bad. We worried, but they just came in and checked on us, and my mom took us home. We later learned that the front door swung open and a little green man ran up the stairs. They didn't know which room it went into, but it never left. That freaked us out. Then, 5 or so years later, around 2004, I came home late after football practice, and I saw that nobody was home. When I got inside, I had to use the bathroom. As I go downstairs, the upper balcony started just as you land on the lower portion. As I got to the bathroom, right as you make it down, I heard stomping above me. Thinking that it was my brother trying to scare me, I told him to knock it off, or I will tell Dad, and I went to do my thing. However, the stomping continued to follow me. I just yelled that it wasn't working, and once I perched atop the porcelain throne, I heard a louder stomp just as I sat down. And then it dawned on me. The upstairs bedroom was full of storage because it kept clogging up. That's when I went quiet and hurried up. I still wanted to believe that it was my brother. I was yelling out to him to knock this shit off. I walked up just like a normal person onto the main floor, and as I looked, I heard scuttling, but I didn't see anything. I just had to check it out, even though my body was buzzing with electricity. Thankfully, I had the foresight to open the front door before walking up the stairs. I saw that our bed's open, so I felt like it was just my brother, and I said again to knock it off, but the feeling never left. So I make it to the top, just enough to peek around the banister and looking into our room. You can only see a small bit because the rest open right out after the door. I just said knock it off or else, when everything in me was like a shock or a jolt, and I heard little stampering of fast-moving feet, not like the Chucky doll, but something similar, sort of like how fast Stewie's from Family Guy, his foot animation, something like that. That's somewhat of how it sounded. When from around the corner, back toward the wall to the front of the house, a dark shadow blurred into view. It just stood there, honestly menacingly, like it had this creepy feeling you got from it. More like, I know you aren't scared, but I've got you now, that kind of feeling. I could see its orangish or yellow-red, glowing eyes, like it was making itself look like it was breathing. I looked at it in disbelief, like, no, this isn't real. I looked it up and down. It was less than 3 feet tall. It had a gaunt stance, and its arms were out like a gunslinger. And then I looked back at its eyes. I was blinking to wake up or something. It stopped moving, and then moved toward me really fast. I just turned and leapt. It wasn't that far really. It was like 8 feet down, and I turned back just as it came into view and into the light. It was still dark, almost like a shadow in the night, but it had a dark green glow to it. No real facial features, but almost telepathically, you can feel or hear what it wanted you to think. I can still hear its feet shuddering to this day. But I just bolted for the door. This time, I jumped a lot farther than I ever thought I could jump, but it was from the door jamb, about 13 feet to across the grass, where the cement ends off from the sidewalk. I honestly screamed, not like a girl, but like that yelp that guys make as I jumped. I rolled as I landed and looked back, and there it was, under that light, still inside the house, just looking at me. I was crying at this point. I told it to leave, but it just gave me a mocking look. I shouted a bit more, and then looked for my dogs, but they weren't around for some reason. They were there when I got home, but it didn't budge. I was honestly more scared of what my parents would think if I left the front door wide open with no one else home that late at night in the cold October night sky. So, above all good reasoning, when I should just run to my aunt's next door for help, I stepped forward toward the door. I didn't think it was expecting that at all, especially while crying and tears coming down my face. I swallowed hard and slowly walked up the handful of stairs. By then, it doubled down to intimidate me, and in a blur, it was right by the door handle. It was only a few feet that it had to move, but it was like a blink, but I didn't blink. It moved almost like a glitch, but not. It was just there, a bit closer. I can't explain it more than it blurred when it moved. I don't know if anyone else has ever been face to face with one of these in the light and seen it move, but I have. I've heard of others seeing them. Also, my cousin fought one in my grandparents' house once when it tried to take her baby when it was just a few months old. So I know people have seen them. I just never heard of anyone seeing them in the full light, but that's what I saw. Think of how in the movie The Matrix, those agents move in on Neo, or when they fight. It was sort of like that, but in real life, without the slow motion. It was just blurred. It's just there, and then in an instant, it's a few feet closer, without looking like it's really moved its body to do so. I flinched a bit, but more from a bullying standpoint than when I got mad. I told it again to leave, in a sobbing, hoarse voice. I was still a couple feet from the door jamb, but that's when I was just going to lunge for the doorknob and shut it. But as I moved, the door just slammed shut without that thing moving. I just cried out again and bolted, not knowing where I was going, just that my feet were moving. I ran, looking toward my aunt's house, making it to the door, bawling my head off. My cousin was the only one home, and she let me in. She was shook up from wondering why I was freaking out like that. She was asking a bunch of questions I don't remember at all, to be honest. I know she thought that somebody was bullying me or beat me up, but I was just asking for my parents, and I asked if she had seen her. She just took me in as all this was going on, rushing for the phone and into the kitchen. She came back with a cup of water and told me to calm down. She called my mom and tried relaying what I'm sure was hard to explain. Just someone chased me out of the house, and I was crying. After a while and some popcorn, she asked what happened. I said, a little green man chased me out of the house. She got up and said she would smudge me off, and if I left, to leave the door open. It was funny, because I remember that she was home alone in the dark watching a scary movie, and that's what I was calming down to. I don't know. After seeing what I've seen, somehow scary movies made it easier. I loved them and all that, but once Insidious came out, that was way too real for my liking, and it brought back too many horrible memories that I don't much like those movies. That captured something incredibly real in those ones. So thank you to Big Bird for sending in those stories from his res in Montana. This is a true event which has happened to me in 2015, and it's bothered me ever since. My parents were going through a divorce, so when I came back from university, the best place for me to live is usually my grandparents' place. My mother was a single mother when I was younger, so I grew up with my grandparents whilst my mother studied at university. And while at university, she got a first-class degree and a scholarship to do a master's and PhD. I'm really used to my grandparents' house. I was born there. I spent my childhood there until I was about 7 or 8. The house itself is quite large. In 1722, it was the site of stables. The garage, which is at the basement level underneath the house, still has rings bolted to the wall to tie your horse to, as well as troughs to put the hay and water in. In fact, again, not long ago, I found an old rusted horseshoe under a cobblestone which had worked its way loose. In 1815, the house was completely redone. The majority of the house stands from this date, without any major reworkings or renovations, other than interior decor. The large, high-ceilinged reception rooms, the hallways, the kitchen, and double staircase all remain. On the second floor, there are 4 bedrooms. 2 are located in what we jokingly refer to as the north wing, and 2 in the south wing. There are also a few bathrooms and 2 offices. One of the bedrooms leads into an office, and there's also a big attic. The garden is large and expansive, and it has some woodland with streams running through it, making it a haven for wildlife. There are some buildings, a dilapidated stable, and an old workshop, about 300 meters from the main house. That's the house. It's been in our family since the 1880s. Several of our family members have lived and died in the house, all of them peacefully in their sleep. My great-grandmother died in the bedroom that I regularly sleep in. I've never felt threatened in the house. Basically, it's one of those houses that I can happily walk through in the dark. There are no feelings of malcontent. Until one week, I arrived at my grandparents' house. I had driven through the night from university and arrived in the early morning at about 4 a.m. The sun was hinting at its arrival in the sky, which was turning a pinkish blue. I parked my car and smoked a cigarette inside my car, as is my ritual. One cigarette inside the car after a long drive. With my cigarette finished, I kept the window open a little bit to air out the car. I collected my bags, went around to the back of the house, crossed the patio, and went up to the terrace. I opened the kitchen door. The kitchen is modern and has these big double doors that are mainly just glass. The front door, however, is old, and you can't close it without slamming it. It rattles all the panes and shakes the floors. I went up to my usual bedroom and fell asleep. I woke up about midday. My grandparents had gone on holiday and wouldn't be back for several days. Going downstairs, my youngest uncle, about 6 years older than me, and his girlfriend were there. We chatted about the drive and how things were going, until they left to go to central London. I had some cereal and then did university work for the rest of the day. My uncle texted me saying that he'd be staying at hers, so I'd have the place to myself. Just as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard a loud double bang downstairs. I instantly knew what it was. It was those new kitchen drawers. They've got too much weight on them, so if you don't close them exactly, they slide open, slowly and then very quickly, until they're stopped by their mechanism. I just ignored this, and I went to sleep. The next day I went downstairs and I felt a bit peculiar when the drawers were all closed in the kitchen. I know what that sound is, and I know it was the drawers. Regardless, I hastened it out of my mind. I must have just imagined it. I did some piano practice on a lovely old piano that my great-great-grandmother bought and used to play. The ivory keys are still yellowed where her cigarettes, which I am told she held between her fingers as she played, or which dropped ash onto the keyboard as she held them tight between her lips. I love playing the piano there, because I can almost feel this pull to the piano, like the piano knows I'm related to its original owner, and the piano sings all the sweeter for it. A picture of the original owner looks over me with a Mona Lisa smile, a hint approvingly, a hint sternly, overall, a kind but matronly face. Halfway through some Sadie, I heard a crash again from the kitchen, the familiar double bang. This time, I went to the kitchen, and I made sure I closed the drawers exactly. That night, I heard the drawers make their double crash again. I went downstairs, and sure enough, they were wide open. I closed them, and worried in case they broke, I put chairs against them so they could not open again. I decided to go out for a cigarette. I only have one a day, usually after dinner, just a ritual I seem to have developed. I stood on the terrace and looked over the garden toward a small copse of woodland which is about 200 meters away. Suddenly, I saw something. Bright eyes, a reflection of an animal, probably a fox, looking at the garden, all lit up with patio lights. It's pretty common. As soon as I see them, they're gone. I went inside and locked up. I went to sleep. I was woken up halfway through the night by hearing the foxes again. They do it pretty regularly, so I'm used to it, although it's a weird noise, like a baby, people often say. The fox was really close to the house this time, just outside my window, when I suddenly heard the double crash from the kitchen. I shrugged it off as a spooky coincidence, and I went back to sleep. The next morning, I felt a draft, so I went downstairs to work out why it was so chilly in the house and windy. I went to the kitchen, and all the drawers were closed. Instead, the kitchen doors leading to the terrace and garden had a big smear on them, at about knee height. It looked like a kid had slobbered all over them. The door was now unlocked, which was weird, because I had definitely locked it. At the bottom of the stairs, leading from the terrace to the garden, was a dead fox. I surmised from its bloody face that it had maybe ran into the glass door, suffered some kind of fatal head injury, and then fallen down the stairs, compounding its injuries. I got an old sack, walked to the woodland about 50 meters across, and I dumped it there. The woodland, as I said, isn't big. It's about 50 meters across in this egg shape. From the middle of the copse, you can see out into the garden from most angles. As I walked out of the copse, I noticed a disturbance in the earth, fairly significant. It looked like a horse had been digging at the ground. I thought it may have been a badger and shrugged it off. When I went into the kitchen door, which I had closed, was wide open, and all the drawers were also wide open. The chairs were on the other side of the kitchen. I was majorly spooked. I got a knife from the drawer and investigated the house. Finding nothing, just some leaves, I closed the drawers and the kitchen doors. At this point, I was really quite anxious, just because it was getting a bit too coincidental for all the weird things to be happening at the same time. Still, it was only about 3 p.m., and I stopped feeling so freaked out by 5 p.m. I made myself some dinner, washed up, locked up, double-checking the lock in the kitchen doors. I went upstairs and went to sleep. As soon as I got into the bedroom, I could sense that something was off. The air was electric. I can't explain it. Something primal was telling me to just turn around and walk away. I ignored the feeling. It's my familial home, and goddamn it, I'll do as I wish. Any ghosts or spooks hanging around are most likely to be either related to me by blood and therefore benevolent, or of horses or animals. As I laid down and got comfortable, I began hearing scratches above me from the attic. Nothing big, just the sound of tiny pattering feet, like if a mole was shuffling through the boxes. We'd never had mice or rats before, but I decided that it was that. I had really vivid, brutal dreams that night. I dreamt about fighting for my life, fighting to the death. I brutally smashed somebody's face into a cement floor. Blood was everywhere. It was very unlike me to have these dreams. I never do. I woke up in a startle at about 5 a.m. The morning light was coming in, gray and listless, through the window. I instantly noticed that my bedroom door was wide open, and what I can only describe as a deer man was watching me. His head was a deer's with antlers, but he had a human face. His torso was human, but his shoulders and arms were deer trotters. He had male human genitals, but his buttocks and legs were deer trotters. I looked at him. He looked at me for about 2 seconds. He was motionless. I felt terror rising, but I didn't feel threatened. I felt horror because it was not a normal thing to see, but I didn't feel as if the deer man wanted to hurt me, more like he was curious. After about 15 seconds, he turned and ducked behind the door toward the staircase. I heard the staircase groan and creak, but only as if a child was descending it. The deer man looked to me, as if he was perhaps 7 foot tall and 3 foot broad, and looked as if he'd weigh at least half a ton, but the staircase gave no indication of any weight, other than a child slowly going down the stairs. At this point, I began praying. I said the Lord's Prayer over and over in my head. I'm not religious. I'm agnostic. I made up prayers. I watched where the deer man had been, and I prayed for 20 minutes. Eventually, I went downstairs. There was no sign that I had had any kind of physical visitation. I put it out of my mind, convinced that it was sleep paralysis or the remnants of a dream. I decided to have breakfast in the garden. I went to unlock the kitchen door, but the door was already unlocked. I had definitely locked the door. At this point, I was really freaked out. I went over to a friend's, had some beers, stayed the night there on his couch. I returned to my grandparents a couple days later. I went for my nighttime cigarette. I saw two eyes reflecting back in the night, two bright orange dots. It wasn't a fox this time, for sure. It was too high. It was the height of a horse on all fours, or, my mind chilled briefly, of a deer. It didn't move. It was just placidly gazing at me. Every so often, the reflection would go, only to reappear, as if it was slowly blinking or looking away for just a second. I got really unnerved. What if it was the deer man? I threw away my cigarette, half unsmoked, locked up the doors, left the outside light on, left the hallway and staircase lights on, and went to my usual bedroom. I felt that weird electricity and pressure again inside that room, so severely worried that I changed bedrooms. I ended up in my mother's old bedroom. My old rocking crib, which had been my mother's and grandfather's crib, was in the corner. My mother's old room looks over the back garden. Feeling freaked out, I decided to stay up a while longer, and I think I just watched a film on my laptop or something. I can't remember what I actually did. I think I was probably on the internet or something, trying to make myself laugh, when I started hearing a noise. It was like grass being torn up outside. I looked out the window, and all I could see were those two same orange eyes looking up at my window. I lost it at that point. I called my uncle and demanded that he come around. That very second, he could hear how upset I was, so he said he was on his way. All this time, the orange eyes looked at me, occasionally looking away or blinking. The eyes began to move closer. It got to just the edge of the light. I could just make out the lighter gray silhouette. It was of a deer standing on two legs, just standing there, just watching. The grass tearing noise began again. The outside lights went out. The bulb somehow blew. I turned on my room lights. I heard the grass tearing noise get closer. Then I heard a clop of a hoof touching patio, a pause, and then the grass tearing noise again. At some point, I heard a car pull up outside. I felt saved. The glass rattling slam as it shut. I called out, "Hello?" I went downstairs. My uncle. He asked what was wrong. We didn't talk about it. We just played some chess, and I avoided why I was so upset altogether. In the morning, I went outside. I meant to fix a dovecote for days. I had to pass nearby this copse. I got tingles, but the light of the day emboldened me. I saw dirt, as if a horse had been digging at the ground. I just turned around and walked back into the house. And for the rest of my stay back home, I stayed at my friend's house. I did go back there, and I never saw it again, but I swear I can sometimes still hear those same noises. So I've wanted to talk about this for a while, but I've never really just got around to writing it down, like putting pen to paper. I grew up on a fair bit of land in the floodplain. My dad owns an excavating company and uses an old farm as his base of operations. One day, during one summer when I was 14, we were working setting fence posts on a hill called a critter pad. This is used for keeping stuff out of the floods. Dad had an old dump truck, a lowboy trailer, and an old construction office trailer with expanded metal over the windows up there. And he wanted a fence for some reason. It was hard work because the top was covered in a layer of gravel. One of us would dig the post hole, set the post, and then the other would work with a pickaxe, getting it through the gravel layer on the next hole. We finished up pretty early in the afternoon. I played some video games. I think it may have been the original Modern Warfare 2, because I got Black Ops way later than everyone else. As it got dark, I realized I'd left my sweatshirt up on the pad. It's about a 30-minute hike from the house. By the time I got up there, it was fully dark out. There was a full moon, but heavy cloud cover, so I couldn't see much. There was also a fair bit of ground fog visible from the top of the pad. I grabbed my sweatshirt from the post that I had left it on, and I decided to take a few minutes and straighten up the tools that we left out. I figured it'd earn me some points with my dad. I was most of the way done when I happened to glance down the side of the pad. It was about 20 feet below, when the moon was out from the clouds, and I saw what I thought at first was a coyote. They usually tend to avoid being anywhere near people, so I assumed that this guy hasn't noticed me, and I held still so I could see it better without spooking it. At this point, the creature stood on its hind legs, and what I'd assumed was a coyote stood at least 12 feet tall. Judging from a 4-foot top strand of wire fence that it was next to in elevation relative to me, its body and legs looked like a starved canine, but the head was much flatter, but still with a long snout. It stuck its front legs out and kind of in front of itself for balance or whatever, I don't know. I froze for a second, and then I grabbed the pickaxe from where I had leaned it up against the low boy and noped into the old construction trailer. I was completely ignoring my fear of spiders, and I shut the door behind me. I sat there in the dark for over an hour. I was too terrified at first to even check my phone in case the light would draw whatever that thing was. When I finally got together some courage, I used my phone screen for light. It was a little flip phone, so not much, and I pulled back the shutters just a little to look out the windows. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't out there that I could see. I clutched the pickaxe, ready to strike as I pushed the door open with my foot. I was expecting it to be hiding right there, but it wasn't, and I made it back to the house in 20 minutes. I thanked God the terrain was all open and flat. If this had been forested, there was no way I would have gone back in the dark. I ended up just telling my dad that I brought the pickaxe back because I thought the handle was loose. My mom gave me a light scolding for taking so long because dinner was ready by then, but generally everything was okay. I assumed that I must have seen a coyote, a regular one, and somehow it had just gotten out of perspective, but I still felt weird about the whole thing, and after that I never felt quite comfortable going out at night. So fast forward about 2 years later. I was 16 now, and I was over at my friend's place with my dad and a couple of his buddies. My friend's grandpa is telling us stories of the old days. Tractors, dragline excavators, and dynamite made repeated features. He gets talking about a pulp forest that extends down into the valley from the slope. It's bordering on some of our land. He goes quiet for a moment, and then asks us if we want to hear a scary story. Of course, we say yes. Dad and his buddies are listening as well. He talked about how he went out hunting ducks on the banks of one of the ponds. This was after a particularly big flood. He goes on for a while, but then the part that I remembered word for word was, "And then I smelled something bad, like rotted meat. You know that rotten meat smell? Well, I went and followed it along this path, through all them pulp trees. Damned if I didn't find the strangest thing I'd ever seen in my life. It looked like a dog, but the size of a big bull. Skinny though, no muscle, and the damned ugliest, most evil-looking face I'd ever seen. It was like a Rottweiler with most of the fur gone. The thing was dead, of course, or I thought it was, but I still just got the hell out of there, fast as my legs could carry me. I didn't want it stuffed, I just wanted out of there. The thing looked evil." I looked over at my dad and his buddies. They were all staring at each other, rigid as hell. Everyone knew what each other had seen at some point or another. One of our neighbors has had disappearing cows, but other than that, I've never again seen this creature. From that point on, though, my dad always made sure that the doors were locked at night. I put a dresser and a bookshelf across my window. I've never really talked or posted about these before. I used to live on a farm in South Africa. And as you can imagine, I did have some strange encounters there. I don't exactly know where to start, so I'll just list off some of the encounters first, and then I'll go into more detail later. So first off was this thing that we called the lurker. It was approximately 6 feet tall, a naked humanoid. If you've ever seen a picture of that thing called the rake, that's pretty much it. This was located usually in the East Forest. It was looking in at my house, creeping around in the bushes. He was kind of a nasty effer. Pretty sure he was responsible for killing a bunch of my chickens. He never attacked people on my farm. He would always run away screaming like a pig if you shot at him. He was honestly genuinely terrifying, and he scared the hell out of me on a few occasions. Comes out of nowhere, especially in the late afternoon into the night. 2. The gremlins. These 1 to 2 foot tall bipeds with jet black fur and bright green eyes. The best description I can give you is like a cat-monkey hybrid. These were located in the West Forest. I usually saw them near my cabin. My ecologist buddy saw some with me one day. He says that he thinks that there's some sort of rare offshoot species of monkey, but he's not really sure. They're curious little critters. They usually never cause me much trouble, but they definitely scared the hell out of me on a few occasions. They were pretty intelligent, even for monkeys. I've seen them hold sharp sticks, like weapons. And then, there's the tree man. This one was weird. I've only ever seen him twice that I can remember, but I've dreamt of it multiple times after the first encounter. My pagan/witch friend says that it's a fae spirit. I don't really believe it, but maybe you do. He was pretty damn tall, like 9 or 10 feet. He had a vaguely humanoid shape, but I never saw him move. He would appear in a place that I know that there never was a tree, only to look back and he was gone. So like I said, I'll start with the first one, the lurker. There have been a few posts that I've seen on the internet that kind of match the description of this creature, so it may be a similar entity. Who knows? Anyways, it was a few years ago. I was 18. I was chilling in my room at night. I was playing games with some friends. The internet was slow as all hell, but at least it worked. My bedroom windows directly faced the East Forest. I got them cracked open because it was super hot that day. I take my headphones off and light up a cigarette. Then I hear something move outside. There's lots of deer and stuff in the area, so I just kind of ignore it at first. A few minutes later, I hear another noise, and then I hear something tap on my window pretty loudly. See, initially I don't care because I have a Great Dane that would get up on his hindquarters and lean in on my window with his front paws, usually because she wanted to sleep inside. But then a moment of realization smacks me like a train. My dog died, very suddenly, a week or two prior. It hadn't exactly completely set in by then that she was actually gone. And then I thought, if it's not my dog, what the hell is leaning on my window? The spotlight outside cast a shadow on the curtains of somebody just standing there. I yell out, "Holy shit, WTF. I think somebody's trying to break in. My shotgun is upstairs." I bolt over to my cupboard and grab a paintball gun. As I slam the cupboard doors open, I hear rustling outside. I rip the curtains open and push the window, paintball gun ready. There's nothing close to my window anymore, but I'm scanning the tree line, and then I see it, peeking out from behind a tree, occasionally ducking back, and then peeking out again. It's that lurker thing. My heart was pounding into my throat. I empty out the paintball gun. I didn't even think I hit it, but the noise definitely scared it away. As it's running away, it starts shrieking, kind of like a distressed pig would, but much raspier. I assume that since my big-ass dog wasn't in the yard anymore, this thing got the absolute balls to come closer to the house. This next one is more of a complicated story, the tree man. So it was a boring Sunday. I was doing nothing. I decided to take a walk to the cabin and chill there for the day. I packed a bag, air rifle, water, ciggies, a power bank for my phone, a can of Monster, and a shitty Bluetooth speaker. For me, this was going to be a good day. I walked to the cabin. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes if you walk at a pretty brisk pace. So I set up at the cabin. I put the bag in the shade and start pumping jams on the speaker. I was shooting at bottles and shit with my pellet gun. I did this for about 4 hours. I lost track of time because I was enjoying myself. At some point, it gets really hot, even for that time of year, even for Africa. I start sweating bullets and I sit down in the shade. I crack open the Monster, light my cigarette. I'm thinking, this has been a pretty good day besides the heat. As I'm going about my business, something suddenly grabs my attention. North of the cabin, still in the clearing, there's a tree with 2 trunks that join into one higher up. That wasn't there before. It's literally like 15 feet away from me. I look higher up, 2 branches on either side, almost like arms. Arm branches are slightly outspread, like it was about to embrace something. The more I look, the more this thing looks human. The branches that make up its legs, arms, and torso actually have definition. This tree thing is built like a really tall, really skinny human. I reckon that it has to be about 10 feet tall. I realize that my ears are now ringing. I think they had been the whole time that I was looking at the thing. The thing that made my blood go cold were the 2 white eyes this thing had, just staring at me, unblinking. It feels like I've been staring at this thing for hours when I eventually snap out of it. My eyes hurt. I blink hard a few times and rub my eyes. When my eyes eventually refocus, I look back at the spot where it was standing. It's gone. For the next few weeks, I keep dreaming of this thing. The dreams are always the same. It's me standing in a clearing, and this scary effing tree is just staring at me. Occasionally, it gets a little bit closer until I shit bricks and wake up. And as for the lurker, you might be wondering if I think that these are supernatural entities. I used to be a hardcore skeptic before I moved on the farm. My parents were too. But when your atheist dad all of a sudden starts carrying a shotgun around outside at night in case he needs to shoot the lurker, you begin to open up to the possibility of the supernatural. Still, my skeptic brain kicks in every now and then. I think about the possibility that the lurker is just a feral human, and perhaps the gremlins are just monkeys that hadn't been documented yet. We discover new species of animals every so often, so it seems kind of possible. The only thing that I really trip up on when trying to be skeptical is the tree man. I know what I saw, and that MFer doesn't like me very much. My pagan friend heard my description of it and was convinced that I encountered some kind of fae or forest spirit. She tried to convince me that it was mad at us for cutting down all the trees, and that the land must have been sacred. It did get me thinking. A few months before I first encountered the tree man, we were burning fire breaks, and I accidentally let the fire break catch a huge drove of dead grass. It was the dumbest mistake I ever made. I'd say about 70% of the West Forest was burnt down in that fire. It took 2 days and all of our neighbors to help stop the damn thing. The whole thing is something that makes me deeply sad whenever I think about it, is that I'm pretty sure that the fire may have also burned straight through those gremlins' habitat. I never saw them again. Sure, they spooked me once or twice, but overall they seemed harmless. I really hope that they just moved. But yeah, maybe the tree man is the angry spirit of the forest. It would make sense if my pagan friend is right. But yeah, as for the gremlins, I'd like to talk about them next. They were pretty chill. I think I got about two interesting stories about them to share. So, for this first one, I was chilling at the cabin. This was a year before the Tree Man incident. I was doing the usual, shooting my targets, consuming disgusting amounts of nicotine and caffeine, but no tunes that day. Out of nowhere, I hear rustling from the bushes all around, and one by one, no less than a dozen of these little dudes appear from the forest. They have shiny black fur, monkey-like bodies, but pointy ears like a cat, and shiny green eyes. Some of them are holding sharp sticks. I think one of them just had a rock. My first reaction was that they were pretty cute. It takes me a second to realize that I've never seen these things before on any farm, nature reserve, or animal channel. And then I think, holy shit. The biggest in the group comes and takes a step or two closer to me and rears up and bares his chest. For some reason, I shout at it, doing my best impression of the baboons that are native to this area. It probably sounded extremely stupid. The big guy bares his fangs in retaliation and makes some sort of hissing noise. I feel like he's wanting to attack me, so I load a pellet into my air rifle and shoot at him. The second I pull the trigger, I realize what a dumb idea that was, because they could run up and attack me much faster than I could reload. Anyways, I completely miss, and they all scatter back into the woods. And for my second encounter, it was the holidays during this one, so my eco-friend, my pagan friend, are both staying at the house for a few days. My ecologist friend wants to go in the woods after hearing about my first gremlin encounter. My pagan friend would rather stay in the house and smoke weed. I don't like weed, so I thought, screw it. My eco-friend and I set off for the cabin, and from there, we go deeper into the woods. He takes my dad's binoculars off the shelf and shoves them in my bag. This feels like a little bit overkill for what we're doing, but it's a good idea, I guess. We walk for like 2 hours, being as quiet as possible, so we don't scare the little dudes away. I was getting tired at some point, so we sat down on a big-ass rock for a break. The rock is elevated just enough that we can see over most of the shrubs and stuff. We didn't talk, we just sat quietly and caught our breath. I zoned out completely when suddenly I hear my buddy whisper in the quietest, most still voice I've ever heard, to pass him the binoculars. Being as quiet as I can, I gently remove them from my satchel and I pass them over. He points them at a gap in between these tall gum trees, a sort of natural clearing. After looking for a while, he passes them to me. He's visibly shaking. I learned later this was from pure excitement. Sure enough, he spotted a single one of these little guys, hunched over in what looked like a little clay bowl. He was eating out of it. He'd stick his hand into the bowl, shove something into his mouth, look around while he was chewing, and then take another bite. I guess my eco-friend couldn't contain his excitement, because when he jumped off the rock, he stumbled and kinda ate shit. The noise of him falling makes the gremlin scatter. It looks like he left his bowl behind. We go to investigate the guy's little snack spot, and the bowl is super basic. It's poorly fashioned out of mud. And what was super weird was that the bowl was half full of dead ladybugs. My ecologist friend deduced that they must be mainly insectivores and clearly preferred ladybugs, but the fact they were able to make a bowl. And if all this stuff isn't weird enough as it is, there's also like non-cryptid weird things that would happen. For instance, there were a lot of animals that would show up that be completely white. I know that those could be just albino, but it's weird how it keeps happening. One in particular one was a very large white owl, and it's weird because there's no white owls native to the area. Similarly, we often spotted white bushbucks. Again, they could just be completely normal albino things, but it's weird that it happens so often. And a weird coincidence I guess I should mention is that this same owl flew into our sliding glass door at full speed the same day that my uncle received his terminal cancer diagnosis. We all chalked it up to a spooky coincidence. And as for the tree man, well, I only ever saw it one more time, while awake that is, but it was probably the worst thing that I went through at that farm. Back out of the cabin, months after the first encounter. At this stage, I'd all but forgotten about the tree man, kind of pushed it from my brain that it ever happened. I was out of the cabin at night. I hardly ever do this because I don't want to run into that lurker thing. I didn't really care tonight because my girlfriend had just broken up with me. I was in a bad mental state, and I had been drinking my sorrows away at my favorite spot all that day, brandy and Coca-Cola. While I'm drunk and depressed, I do notice that the moon looks amazing that night. Not only was the moon beautiful, it was a full moon, so it was surprisingly bright for like 8 p.m. I finish the brandy and stumble over to a tree. The second that I start peeing, I get pushed over. It feels like that I got kicked by a horse. I'm on my back, my pants are around my knees. I'm scrambling backwards, trying to see what hit me. I think I'm seeing double because the tree in front of me has 2 trunks. And then I think, wait, oh shit. I look up and the tree man is towering over me, blocking the moon. The only thing I can see now are those 2 glowing white eyes. One hand is outstretched, like he's about to grab my head. Immediately, I feel sober. I'm freezing, and my ears are ringing, loud as hell. He's really mad. I can feel it in the air. It feels like I'm paralyzed. I'm so focused on his glowing white eyes that I can't move. I can't snap out of it like last time. I'm basically just stuck there in a trance like this, either until he let me go or I passed out from exhaustion. I get woken up by my mother the next day, getting absolutely shat on for not coming home last night. The fact that I'm pantless, lying next to an empty liquor bottle certainly doesn't help. That day, I suffered the highest fever I've ever had. I spent most of the day puking. My eyes were practically swollen shut. I had baseball-sized bruises on my chest, back, and ass, and my back was also scratched all to hell. That night was burned into my brain. I dreamt about it for months after that, and while I never saw him again, I never could shake the feeling that the tree man was always watching me. I literally get intense anxiety or panic attacks if I stay deep in the woods for too long because it feels like that he's there. Hence, I moved to the beach. Things are a lot better now. It's been at least a year since I went back to the farm. A family member named William looks after it now. I'm pretty sure that he's aware of everything that goes on there, but he's very religious, so either they don't bother him or he just prays the spookies away. If I ever go back to the farm, my pagan friend says that I should start burying eggs, milk, and honey in the evening as a gift to the spirits in the forest. I'm actually considering doing it. While he scares the hell out of me, I feel like I want and need to apologize to the tree man and the gremlins, but not the lurker. F that thing. And I suppose before I go, I should elaborate too on my father's experience with the lurker. So, the interior perimeter fence was fully electrified then. It had these little plastic things that fasten the wires to the pole. They break often, and always at night too. This shorts the circuit out and makes the fence alarm go off. From our investigations, this almost always happened because something pushed its way between the bottom wire and the ground. I was thinking to myself, that shriveled up lurker thing probably doesn't give 2 shits about a little shock. But anyways, every time this happened, my father and I would have to grab a spare plastic thing and some tools and walk the entire perimeter of the fence to find which one had broken this time. The first few times, we went out without any weapons or anything. But one night, the alarm goes off. I rush to the garage. My father puts on his shoes. We make it about 10 meters out the door when my father stops dead in his tracks. This is a hardened South African farmer. I've never seen this guy scared of anything. He just says, "Son, go inside." He spoke so deliberately, I didn't even question it. He follows me inside and emerges from his room a few seconds later with a shotgun. I hardly ever saw that man with a gun, but tonight he was basically a commando. We get back outside, and my dad points the gun into the distance. I follow where he's aiming, and sure enough, that lurker thing is gawking at us from behind a tree. Even worse, this tree is within the interior perimeter. Dad unloads on the thing. I know nothing about guns, but it's a pump action one, and it holds like 8 rounds or 9 rounds or something. I know at least some of the buckshot connected because this thing goes screaming back under the fence and into the forest at full speed, leaving a few spots of muddy brown blood. I explained to him that was the thing outside my window. He says if he ever sees it again, he'll kill it and bury it in the septic tank. But yeah, that's all for my stories right now. I feel like I want to go back to the farm, and gun laws in South Africa are much more stringent than America, but if I can get my hands on a good rifle, my friend that looks after the farm now and I are going to go after that lurker thing, because again, it kills my livestock. I also eventually hope to see the gremlins again. They didn't really bother me, besides scaring me a couple times, and I really hope that they got away in that fire. And also, I want to make things right with the tree man. But yeah, that's all I have for now. "2017 was, by all intents and purposes, the second worst year of my entire life. During this low period, my best friend Martin offers to take me out hunting with him. And if you're wondering where we went, it was Clark County, Alabama. It was on some land that he was paying to hunt on. It was an absolutely beautiful experience. I shot my own 8-point buck on the first night out. I felt so relaxed the entire time. So fast forward to 2018, my best friend invites me out again. A month or two before we head out, a huge storm hits the area. When we arrive, the vibe is very different. It's not the same place as it was before. It just feels very off. That serene feeling that I enjoyed before is missing. The first night, he drops me off at a place he calls the Patch. It's a bare patch of grass that forms a donut around a series of smaller trees in the middle. There's woodland for miles surrounding the hunting post. He leaves to go hunt in another area pretty far off. He tells me that he'll be back at 8 p.m. to pick me up. It's 4:30 when he drops me off. The post that I'm in is one of the shittiest ones I've ever been in. There's only one person that can fit in there. The walls are super thin. There's 4 windows, one in the front and 2 on either side, and a very small one on the back. The door, if you can call it that, to get in this thing was only locked by a small hook, and it was barely on its hinges. This didn't bother me at the time because there's no predators in the area besides some big hogs. I decide to sit down and chill since I'm gonna be there a while, and I was only going to shoot a deer if I could tell it was a cow horn, read inbred, and a genetic dead end. A few things to note: I had a hunting knife that Martin gifted me, and one of his rifles with a few bullets in case I needed to take a second shot, a thermoscope, and a high-powered flashlight. There was no cell phone reception. I found that out when I tried texting someone. Some of the other areas can have spotty reception, albeit very poor. I decided to just chill and enjoy the ambience. It was a very pretty afternoon. A few clouds were out. Squirrels were jumping around. Trees were rustling. The usual. Just as the sun was beginning to set, the ambience drastically changes. All the trees stop rustling. No squirrels. No wind. Everything just goes silent. Suddenly, I feel dread, and my body begins to tense up. From behind me, I can hear something walking toward me. It did not sound like a deer or some hog or anything else. Its gait reminded me of a human's walking through the woods at a pace that implied that it was stalking something. I remained perfectly still, making sure that my breathing is steady. I keep my eyes fixed ahead. My hand instinctively grips my knife that's strapped to my chest. Whatever is behind me keeps moving closer, making no noise besides the footsteps that crunch the leaves. It was still fairly sunny outside, but I did not want to look at it. It moves to my right and stops right by that window. Then it starts exhaling, not inhaling and exhaling, just exhaling. It was raspy and heavy, like someone had just ran a marathon, but it was inhumanly deep. Something primal inside my mind was screaming at me to not look at it, that if I did look at it, I felt like I was going to die. It sits there, just exhaling and looking at me, while I sit like a statue for several minutes. And then it's gone. No running away, no walking away, no leaves crunching in the distance, just silence again. I stay perfectly still, not wanting to move. And then gradually, the ambience returns. The wind begins to rustle the leaves. The squirrels are moving again. I even see a family of deer appear. I'm too freaked out to leave. I don't even know where my friend is, and I can't call him. All I can do is wait. Beyond my paranoia getting to me, nothing else happens. My friend ends up picking me up an hour late because he took a shot at a buck and was waiting to see if he would come back. When we get back to our cabin, I spill my beans. He's scared and gets chills. Then he proceeds to tell me about what happened to his little brother just a few years prior. And that part of the story goes like this. So Daniel's little brother is named Daniel. Daniel, Martin, and their dad were all on a hunting trip. They were hunting in a different area called the Meadow. It's an area with extremely tall grass and a patch that leads off into the forest. The hunting stand is raised pretty far off the ground, probably 8 to 10 feet. While hunting, Daniel's chilling on his phone when the same thing happens. The wind stops. The grass stops rustling. There's no more animal ambience. And then he hears footsteps approach him from the tall grass. There's only one window on the stand, and it doesn't look at the surrounding fields. The footsteps slowly walk up to the stand and then stop directly beneath him. He freaks out and starts texting his family to come get him immediately. He's too scared to call or make any noise. Martin and his dad drive out to get him, and they find nothing underneath the stand. Daniel never hunted in that area ever again. The strange thing is that Martin and I hunted there before, and nothing happened. So fast forward to 2019, Martin invites me again to go hunting with him and Daniel. This time, I had other stuff going on, so I politely refused. While chilling in the cabin late that night, both of them hear knocking on the side of the wall near the living room. 3 knocks in normal succession. Martin goes out to see what could be making that noise, armed, of course. He finds nothing. Not even 30 minutes later, the same knocks occur in the living room where they are. Once again, he goes out, but there's still nothing there. No tree branch, no anything near the cabin that could be making the noise. And keep in mind too, this cabin is in the middle of nowhere. There isn't another house or cabin in the area for at least another mile. And out of all of us, if there was anybody who would shoot someone, it's probably Martin. I've seen him get into and come back from some pretty hairy situations. But that event shook Martin and his little brother. Conveniently, they ended their hunting lease, to put it that way, and then they purchased their own property in Mississippi, and now they hunt there. I have no idea what happened, neither does he. It doesn't seem like a Bigfoot story or anything else I've ever heard of. The whole thing is just really weird. So at the time of this, I was living in Asheville, North Carolina, but I was house sitting for my mother in Fairview. Her house is in the middle of nowhere, halfway up a mountain. The internet was very spotty. The phone service was awful. Even the landlines weren't that great. I have 2 cats in the house. Neighbor 1 had goats and chickens, and a rooster that won't shut up at 6 a.m. until about noon. Neighbor 2 just has an old dog. Anyways, it was around October 2015, and like I said, I was house sitting. I have a sawed-off 12-gauge and a new-to-me LC9S. I was doing a complete cleaning and oiling of said LC9S. I've gotten to the point where I can assemble it in about 10 minutes at a calm pace with the booklet in front of me. At about 11 p.m., I was oiling the pistol in the downstairs living room, and I heard a tap at the door. The door wall is a 3-panel glass thing. The middle glass is the panel door. I look up, assuming it's the neighbor who had lost a chicken again. But it wasn't. It was something there, with white skin, long nails, black eyes, sharp teeth, short strands of hair. The proportions were all wrong for a human. We stare at each other for about 5 seconds, and then it taps again on the window. The next thing I know, my gun is assembled, there's a round chambered, and the safety is off. The cat that was sleeping on the back of my chair suddenly hisses and launches toward the door. The cat's not too bright, but has always been territorial. It once had a standoff with a police shepherd. I duck to avoid having my scalp ripped off by the cat. By the time I look up, the thing's gone. I sit there, with my pistol trained at the door for what feels like an eternity. I holster the pistol, grab the sawn-off, and load double-O plated buckshot. I have a flashlight, and I rig that to the shotgun barrel. I tactically exit the house. My heart's pounding like a jackhammer. The instant I open the door, the smell of blood hits me. I gag, and then I hear it. The driveway's stone, not asphalt. I can hear it around the upper part of the driveway. I creep to the corner of the house and peer around. It's there, at the kitchen window, trying to look inside. It's about 20 feet away. And this is an 18.5-inch barrel with no choke, a 20-inch spread at 30 feet, give or take. I brace my shotgun. I attempt to get a good bead on the thing, with my heart still going faster than a rabbit. The small corner of my brain notices that there's no animal noises that aren't from this thing. No dog, insect, or anything. I breathe and squeeze. I close my eyes at the last second. And the shotgun was insanely loud, but not as loud as this thing. It roars like a lion challenging a rival and turns toward me. I drop the shotgun and pull my pistol. It starts loping toward me, its arms swinging by its sides. I have 7+1 rounds of JHP in the gun and 7 rounds of full metal jacket in the second mag. I run through all 15 rounds. The thing isn't even slowed. I grab the shotgun again and sprint back down the small hill to the lower living room. I slap every single light on the way. I grab the shot shell box and the 9mm box. I flip the couch and move it to the corner. I get behind it, reload the pistol and the spare mag, and never sleep. I spend the rest of the night behind that couch. 11 a.m. rolls around. I decide to check out the damage to the property. The first stop is the outside downstairs door. There's nothing on the stones, but there's something in the small garden plot. A footprint, but not a human footprint. It looked like a cross between an ape and a raptor. Next stop, the corner of the house. I find the shotgun shell, and I find 17 9mm brass fired. I think, okay, cool. Let's walk toward the front door. By some miracle, none of the pellets hit the house. Not found any blood or splotches or anything that I did any damage to this thing. I'm thinking that I must have missed in my panic. Let's check behind the house for obvious missing bullets. Behind the house is an old stone wall, no mortar. There's a total of 3 impact marks, 3 misses. Out of 17 9mm and however many buck pellets, only 3 of them missed. A neighbor strolls in around 2 p.m. and asks me if I heard anything around 12 last night. I say, yeah, it was just a bear that got too nosy. And he says, really? Where's the body? I say, I missed. And he says, son, it wasn't a bear, was it? And it wasn't no human neither, right? And it wasn't one of those moonshiners. I said, how did you know? He said, lucky guess. You'll find a package waiting for you before sundown tonight on your doorstep. I suggest that you use it. Sundown rolls around. A wooden box is on my doorstep. I open it up. There's a strange mixture. It's white ash, something else, and salt. I coat every single bullet I had that night. I had a box of about 300 or so loose 9mm rounds. I slept in my bed for the rest of the week with the shades drawn, the doors locked and barricaded, my pistol under my pillow, and my shotgun next to me. The neighbor never mentions it ever again to me or my mother. Back when I was 17, I went to stay with my uncle who owned a ranch in Idaho for the winter. My parents were older and had to be in their late 40s, so my uncle, Dad's older brother, is close to 60 and more like a grandpa than anything. He's been married and divorced twice and has been living alone for almost my entire life. I live in Mesa, Arizona, so the drive was absolutely grueling. My uncle picked me up in October of 2018. He's super tall and a big-ass dude with a massive beard. He's super chill, but really rough-looking. His ranch is in the middle of nowhere, with no neighbors for miles, I think. When I got there, it was kind of exactly how I thought it would be. Super old school, kinda run down looking. Even from just driving in, I noticed something different. He had a long line of rocks lining the end of his property that were all painted white. I asked him about them, and he told me that he would tell me in a minute. As soon as we got in the house, he told me that there are rules when staying with them, and if I broke them, he would have no problem driving me all the way back home. He said I couldn't go out any time after sundown without him, under any circumstance. At night, I needed to have my curtains drawn at all times, the lights off. If I needed a light, I had to use a candle that he kept next to the bed. He took me outside and pointed to the white rocks and said that the rocks went around the entire property and have been there even before he lived there. He told me never to go over the rocks or go anywhere far from the house without him. I was kind of spooked, and I asked him why, and all he said was like, oh, there's a lot of coyotes around, and they can kill you if they kind of gang up on you. The first night was fine, except for the awful bed. The next day, he asked if I wanted to have fun and took me out back to shoot. A few weeks go by, fine, just hanging out and having bonfires, shooting and helping him on the property. I end up getting into pretty decent shape just helping him. And then, in the middle of November, we woke up to find a dead deer in the yard. My uncle flips his shit. He grabs me and puts me in the house and starts to lock the doors and the windows. He tells me to grab my shit and keep it near the door. I ask him to please tell me what the hell is going on, but he doesn't. He has me sleep in the living room on a pull-out couch while he sleeps in the chair. The next few days, it's like he's a totally different person. He's on edge and super paranoid. I end up sleeping in the living room for a week until he chills, and all is calm. Thanksgiving rolls around, and we cook up a turkey and a bunch of other frozen stuff that he had in the freezer. We stuff ourselves, and he even lets me have a few beers. We're chilling by the fire and talking about the time he got into a fight with a guy over his ex-wife while listening to his old records, when suddenly a shit ton of loud noises came out of nowhere. We both shoot up. He runs for the door. I follow after him and end up running full speed into the back of him and falling over. He had stopped at the door and started locking the locks. I thought he was running outside, so I ran full speed. He tells me to grab his shotgun. I'm freaked out at this point because my massive badass of an uncle is absolutely losing his shit. The loud noises outside sound like barking, they sound like yelling, and someone hitting a metal trash can. It's all mixed together, and it's a weird garble of noises. And then, the window breaks. A massive rock was thrown through it. It was one of the painted white rocks. I'm freaking out now. My uncle shoots out the window. My ears are ringing, and I'm crying at this point. He tells me to grab a table and put it against the window. I put it against the window while he runs to his room. He comes back out with his rifle, and he hands it to me. He tells me if I see anything, to not hesitate to shoot it. I ask him if we should just call the cops, but he tells me that they would never get here in time. It would be at least a few hours. All night, we sit in the living room listening to whatever this thing is destroy the porch and pound on the door. As soon as the sun comes up, my uncle goes to the door and starts to unlock it. I start to freak out, like WTF are you doing? They're still there. He rips the door open, and there's nothing. I'm absolutely shitting my pants, thinking of all the stories that I've read on the internet about monsters and cryptids and everything else. The door is absolutely destroyed on the outside. It's super scratched up. There's chunks missing. The porch has pieces missing, and his truck has all the windows smashed and the tires are shredded. It looks like a bomb went off outside. My uncle looks around and sighs. I ask him, what the hell was that? He looks at me and tells me, oh, there's a gang that comes around and does this type of stuff to people's houses. I say, a gang? Why are you lying to me? What's actually going on? He basically tells me something to the effect of shut the F up and relax. I don't believe him in the slightest, and I can see that he's kicking himself for telling such an awful, shitty lie. I go to take a picture of the door outside, and he grabs my phone and says no. I say, what the hell? He tells me that if my mother saw what happened, she would kill him. He tells me to relax, and that it's okay. We clean up the porch, and he has me help him replace his tires with a few old ones from the shed. We limp the truck back to town for him to get replacement tires and ask about the windows. Everyone in town is staring hard at us, like we just drove into town on a clown car. It's a small town with a cafe/diner, gas station, mechanic, general store, and a motel. Everyone knows each other for the most part. The gas station clerk comes out and starts to talk to my uncle. The clerk and my uncle are talking quietly, and I can see the clerk is upset. I overhear him say, well, what did you expect? It's getting worse every year, man. At this point, I think, okay, WTF. He takes me back to the house and tells me that the gang that he was talking about was real, but they're more like vandals and tweakers. I still don't believe him in the slightest, but I act like I do for his peace of mind. That night, my uncle was surprisingly calm and told me that they wouldn't come back 2 nights in a row. The night was calm, except for this weird feeling in the air. It was almost like static or electricity, like the whole place would blow up if the littlest thing happened. I woke up really late to my uncle snoring in his chair. I had to go to the bathroom super bad. The fire had died out, so I used my phone light to make my way to the bathroom. The bathroom is super small, with a tiny window at the top of the back wall. This is also right behind the toilet. I get to the bathroom and I turn on the light to piss. While I'm doing my business, I start hearing this weird noise. It's like the tiniest scratching sound. I quickly realize it's coming from the window, and then it turns into tapping. I'm so terrified, I'm just frozen there. If I wasn't already peeing, I'd definitely be doing it now. And then I realize I really screwed up. I turned the light on when I'm supposed to be using a candle. I start shaking, and then the window breaks and the glass hits me. I see this awful pale hand reach through the broken window. Screaming, I back out of the bathroom, pissing all over my legs and pants. I didn't even look back at the window. I just ran down the hall, trying to pull my pants up. My uncle runs around the corner and grabs me. He yells at me, "What happened? What happened?" while I try to yell back what did indeed happen. He sees the light on and runs to shut it off. He then yells, "I thought I made it effing clear about the lights at night." I'm crying, digging through my duffel bag looking for new pants. The next day, we leave. He drives me home, saying it just will be safer if I wasn't there. He told me not to ever tell my parents because they would absolutely freak out, and I don't blame them. He stayed at the house with us for a few days, and eventually we both chilled out again. The way I see it, I was a kid back then. I was only 17. I'm older now. I have more experience. I want to go back and see if he'll let me take pictures, set up a camera, or maybe even help him deal with whatever is plaguing his property. I don't really know what to think, since he won't tell me really anything about what happened. It's not like some other stories that you see on the internet where it's talking and whispering or copying voices. Whatever this is just violent. And I was scared back then, but I'm not scared anymore. Alright, I finally feel like sharing this story that happened to me a few years back in 2017. I was out hunting deep in the woods with my friend Jacob and his girlfriend Maria. Around noon, we decided to call it quits and do some off-roading in the Idaho backwoods. We drive at least another 20 miles back into the woods and are at least 40 miles from anything now. We look off to the right and see it. 2 mine shafts with big steel gates blocking them. We get the brilliant idea to check them out. One shaft has a gate that is literally cemented in place, which I guess means we aren't going there. The second shaft, however, just has a flimsy rusted chain and lock around the entrance gate. The gate has a bit of a gap, but it's too small for Jacob or I to fit through. Maria volunteers to squeeze through and see how far back it goes, as it curves off about 35 feet in, and we couldn't see past that. I hand her my 9mm pistol and a mag light from my Jeep, and she goes off around the corner. She says, "Guys, it seems to go back a ways," that she yelled out. Our interest is obviously piqued. She squeezes back out of the gap, while Jacob and I debate how to get our fat asses in there. We decide to take turns trying to shoot the lock with our hunting rifles, which, brilliant, right? So 4 rounds of 30-06 later, technically 2 because they were misses, the lock is shattered. Jacob and I go into the Jeep and grab our headlamps and decide to duct tape the mag light to my rifle. We set off timers on our phone for 2 hours and tell Maria to wait at the rig and go get help if we aren't back in 4 hours. Everything was good for the first bit because there were some cool icicles forming from the floor up to the ceiling. At roughly 125 yards in, we hit water. We should have turned back there, but no, we were stupid. We do rock, paper, scissors to see who should go in. I lost, so I had to take point, and I flipped my mag light on for extra light. The water has a really nasty orangish tint and smells like feces, rot, and metal. I was shivering in my waders, but I pushed forward with Jacob covering the rear, and then I hear what sounds like more sloshing in the water than what we were making. Jacob heard it too, so he sits still. The sloshing continues for a minute or so, and then stops. We can't see clearly past about 30 feet in front of us, but I swear I can see eye shine. I tell Jacob. He responds with, "Probably just a bat or something, man. Don't worry about it." Which, if only that were the case. Against my better judgment, I keep going. But Jacob and I swapped rifles and he took point. After what seemed like a mile or so of trudging through thigh-deep water, we finally hit dry soil again. Jacob and I decide to take a minute to catch our breath and sit down. As soon as our asses hit the ground, both of us hear an echoing voice that sounded just like Jacob, but after smoking a carton of cigarettes in a day. It says, "It's just a bat, man," followed by the most blood-curdling, inhuman scream I have ever heard. My stomach drops. We quickly debated whether if it would be faster to go back through the water or to try and find another way out. We chose wrong. We both decided to try and find an air vent or an emergency exit instead. Eventually, we come to a crossroads in the shaft. There's one path going forward that's collapsed, and there's what sounds like demonic cackling coming from the left. We decide to go right. This was wrong choice number 2. As we continue along, the smell of death overtakes us, and we think, screw this. We start heading back for the left path. A third set of footsteps starts coming from behind us. The cackling in front of us continues as well. We make it back to the crossroads. Jacob and I decide that we should try and make them back down by shooting. If you have never shot a high-caliber rifle in a confined space, don't do it. It hurt, and it makes the world spin. So, the world is spinning. There's loud-ass demonic-style screeching that can be heard over top of the ringing that's in my ears. Our disoriented asses take off down the left path. We get stopped in our tracks by a very tall figure standing in the tunnel. This figure was so tall that it had to hunch over in the tunnel. The body was so black that it just absorbed the light of our headlamps and flashlights. Neither of us could see its face, as its back was turned to us, but to this day, it was the scariest thing I've ever seen. From there, Jacob and I turned and booked it back to the crossroads. I've never ran faster than I ran through that water. When we got out, neither of us said a word to Maria. We loaded everything in the Jeep and took off back down the trail towards civilization. Now, in the years since this has happened, Jacob and I have just lost touch. I think whatever happened down there seems to have changed him. I don't know if he's still with Maria or not, but I hope they're both doing well regardless. The only reason I decided to talk about this now is because I recently found another abandoned mine, and these memories all came flooding back. Eventually, I might work up the nerve to go in there and see what's around, but not anytime soon. At least, not until I get some friends who are willing to go with me, 'cause I'm not going alone. So when I was 19, I worked a regular job, and that's the word I'll use to be nice instead of dead-end job that I hated. But this was in western North Carolina, and I've lived there my whole life. My county borders Tennessee, so the view from my door is the Blue Ridge Mountains. Now, despite all of this, I was never much of a nature person. My friends knew this, and my friend Jay decided to make me an offer to come camping with a couple other friends, Mark and Daniel, over the state line. He said that he knew a perfect, quote, undiscovered spot on the west side of Rowan Mountain. I was nervous about camping out of state, but I wasn't going to wuss out in front of the boys. I agreed to go. A month goes by while we all request time off work and to get our gear together. My whole family are gun people. Me, not so much, but they insisted that I bring something, so I ended up taking my dad's AR-12 and a 10-round mag. I figured that this was going to be enough to take down anything that moves that was trying to get at our campsite. So the day of finally arrives. We all pile into my CRV and drive for maybe 45 minutes. We pass Rowan Mountain and we're heading in the direction of Cherokee National Forest, and Jay points out a spot on the side of the road. I pull over, but it's not much more than just a dark gap in the trees. He says, "That's the spot. Head through that gap." I was honestly more concerned about the damage it was going to do to my paint job rather than an unmarked trail. I drove for at least 10 minutes through the shittiest, twistiest mountain dirt road I've ever experienced. It was barely wide enough to not take out my mirrors. The path comes to an abrupt stop in the middle of a small clearing. I end up skidding to a stop. Thank God for good brakes and tires. I hop out of the car. Jay says something about leaving the car here and says that we have to walk the rest of the way. My internal thoughts were, Jay, what the hell? But we eventually get to our campsite, and Daniel is our survivalist kind of guy in the group, so he starts a fire. The wind picks up, delaying our fire, and for a second, I smelled something nasty, like rot. Growing up near the woods, I'm not unfamiliar with the smell of death. I mention this to Jay, and he says that it's probably just a dead deer. You'd be surprised at the amount of asshole hunters out here who will shoot a deer and just not go after it. I couldn't help but picturing a bear that got into something. We don't really have wolves here as far as I know, but the black bears can get pretty big, and they're not exactly scared of humans. So we eventually get the fire going, and we finish setting up. Jay and Daniel have their tents up. Mark and I are set up in our hammocks. My watch says it's around 6 p.m. We dragged out some smaller logs to sit around the fire, and Daniel busted out a camp stove, and we're all in the middle of figuring out what to eat when the wind picks up again, and that smell, that rot smell, comes back way stronger with the wind. We lose our appetites almost instantly. I ask, how close is that damn deer? But all the others are just looking into the tree line, just scanning back and forth. The smell is getting stronger, and the hair on the back of my neck stands up. Jay stands up and pulls the hatchet that we use for firewood out of the log and starts walking to the tree line. We're kind of freaking out, telling him to come back, but he just says that he has to check on something. About 5 feet past the trees, we lose sight of him, but we can still hear the leaves and branches crunching as he walks. Maybe a minute later, all the sound stops as a light snow begins to fall. This goes on for about 5 minutes, and after exchanging glances, Mark and Daniel and I grab the shotgun, and we start calling out for Jay. The only sound is our own voices for a while, and then I slowly start to hear crunching in the underbrush again, but coming from the direction of my car, not where Jay went into the trees. I tell them to shut up and level the shotgun in the direction of our entrance. Clicking the safety off, I call out, "Jay, is that you?" The crunching is getting louder and closer, like someone was picking up speed. This AR-12 has a pretty strong light attached to the foregrip, so I flick it on. I see Jay running with his head down, running like he was about to fall over. I re-engage the safety. I call out to him, "Jay, what the hell, man? Where were you?" He doesn't look up, but he does keep coming our way, stumbling and falling into the clearing a few seconds later. He's missing his jacket and the hatchet, and he's got a big tear in the back of his shirt. We pick him up and guide him to the side of the fire, looking at each other nervously and waiting for him to speak. I kneel down and put my hand on his shoulder. He flinches. He finally opens his mouth when I ask him again what happened out there, and just says, "Is that you?" I was so confused by what he said that I didn't realize that Daniel and Mark had started backing up. I said again, "What the hell happened out there, Jay? Where's the hatchet?" He looks down at his hands for a few seconds, wiggling his fingers, and then glances back up to me. He looks me dead in the eyes and just mumbles, "Where's the hatchet? What the hell, man?" He then bolts straight up, says, "Hatchet," and walks back into the tree line, the same way he did the first time. Only when he's leaving do I notice something bizarre. Through the tear in his shirt, I can see his back, his bare back. Daniel looks at me and says, "Did you see the—" I said, "The tattoo?" "Yeah, I saw." The previous summer, Jay had gotten a full back tattoo in honor of a girl that he has since left. I remember it so vividly because we spent days trying to talk him out of it and saying what a stupid idea it was. I notice I haven't heard him walking through the brush like earlier, so I flip my light on, pointing it towards where he walked into the trees. He's just standing there, maybe 10 feet from where he went in, his head down, and he's kind of shaking, not like a cold shiver, but a shake like a tweaker would do, someone who's in withdrawals. I click the safety off my shotgun and chamber around. I watch him put his hand on a tree, leaning his weight on one arm, and I swear it looked like he was stretching. The wind picked up again, carrying a light flurry of snow. The rot smell was back, 10 times worse than before. When the snow cleared, Jay was gone. I felt a sense of dread creeping over me, so I backed up toward the fire. Daniel and Mark are in full panic mode, saying that they saw something in the trees. I begin to notice that the crunching has returned and is now circling our camp. Whatever it is, has to be doing so at a full sprint. During the panic, I hear a voice from what sounded like 20 feet above us. It said, "Is that you? What the hell, man?" I swing the light up to see nothing but light snowfall, and immediately after, I hear a laughter echo from all directions at once. It honestly sounded like 20 or 30 people all harmonizing with laughter, if that makes any sense. A tree branch behind me snaps loudly, and I spin around and unload a slug into a tree. The laughter returns, but it's from the other side of the camp. As I turn, I notice that I'm now alone in the clearing. Daniel and Mark have just vanished without a sound. I'm really freaking out now. I just think, I'm done with this. I'm out. F all of this. F the supplies. I grab my pack, sling it onto my back, and begin booking it towards where my car was. It was a 10-minute walk back to camp, so it should have been way shorter at a full sprint. But I ran 20 minutes before skidding to a stop, realizing that I was now lost and more than likely absolutely screwed. I noticed that I haven't heard any noises other than my own breathing and footsteps. Almost as soon as I start to take in deep breaths, the rot smell comes back in full force. I gag more than once, but thankfully, I avoid throwing up. I hear a very quiet crunch about 40 feet from where I came, and then a voice calls out, "Did you see the tattoo?" "Yeah, I saw." If I wasn't panicking before, I am now. It sounded like 2 people talking at once, and this time I recognized it as my conversation with Daniel. I'm 100% convinced now that whatever is out there is not human. I summon the courage to stand and shine my light into the forest again. Just a few small trees swaying lightly. As I start to move the light away, I notice one of the trees inch forwards. I spin the light back, still swaying ever so slightly. I think to myself, am I losing it? And then I realize, wait, those aren't trees. I pan the light up, and those small trees come together, and I see that whatever this is insanely tall, like 12 feet at a minimum. It looks like cracked bark with dark fur sticking out of the cracks. I can't see any extremities. They stretch outside of the range of my light. Something that looks like its head leans down toward me, and I point the light at it. Its face is completely featureless, but I watch as the bark cracks and spreads, revealing a wide mouth with no visible teeth. Out of reflex and sheer panic, I fire 2 rounds at it, and blowing off the top third of its head. But this doesn't kill it. It only seems to piss it off. It lets out an ear-shattering screech, and the wind picks back up, going from about 0 to 40 miles per hour and slamming loose snow into my face. I backpedal hard, wiping my face clear. I see through the thin cone of light that it has moved. I fire a panic shot into the darkness and bolt away from it. As I'm running, I can hear it crashing through the brush behind me, slowly but surely gaining on me, and I'm starting to hear the laughter come back, although I couldn't tell you if it was just in my head or not. My light glints off of something about 50 feet ahead of me, and passing it back over confirms it. Glass, meaning that either my car is there or a cabin. I summon all of my remaining strength and run full speed at it, recognizing it as my car through the brief flashes of light. The sounds behind me are getting closer and louder, like it's running on all fours. As I'm 20 feet from the car, the headlights flash on, and I hear a loud, deep screeching behind me as the sounds of pursuit stopped. I clear the last 20 feet and leap inside my back seat. Thank God it was unlocked. I sit up, panicking, and see Daniel and Mark sitting in the front seats, staring at me with major concern. The combination of the unscheduled cardio and my relief caused me to immediately pass out. I wake up sometime later, still in the car. Daniel is driving. I ask them where they went, if they saw Jay, if they saw it. Too many questions all at once. They look at each other, obviously confused, and Mark says, "Well, dude, you told us to meet you here back at the car. What the hell took you so long?" I want to respond with a, "What the hell?" but I decide against it. I apologize instead. We get all the way back home before I ask about Jay. They exchange another look, and Daniel says, "Are you feeling all right? You told us that you saw his body out there." I kind of shake my head and say, "Oh, right." I get a call a week later from a Carter County sheriff saying that they found Jay. They found him passed out with minor frostbite on the shore of Miller Lake, which was roughly 7 miles south-southwest of our campsite. We all went to visit Jay in the hospital to find him in some kind of coma, which we didn't know if he was ever going to come out of. But then we get a call one morning that Jay was missing from his room. They said security cameras show him waking up, looking very confused, and checking himself out, and then hopping into a cab. They kind of assumed that he made some kind of miracle recovery, and while they're upset at his leaving, they weren't nearly as freaked out as I was when I heard. And since then I've been trying to get a hold of him, to ask what happened, to try and explain what happened from our point of view, but I can only imagine that from his point of view, we just left him out there with God knows what, in the winter, to die. Alright, I want to tell you the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. I was living in West Virginia. It was the summer of my junior year. Our friend Jake was turning 18, so we obviously were going to have a party. We decide to go camping. I bring a big-ass tent. It's me, my friend Spencer, Jake, Sam, and Shane. We pick out a place that's not far from Spencer's property, but deep enough in the woods that going back to the house is damn near impossible in the dark. And before I continue, there's a little bit of backstory here. So there is this, quote, friend of ours who we used to hang with, but we kind of got disgusted with him, and he's been basically fading out from our group. His ego was bloated. He's never contributed weed, and he often hindered our adventures as a result of his folks having caught him with weed one too many times. And yes, we're all pretty big stoners. We go out to Spencer's quite a bit, as he lives about half an hour out of town, and his parents don't really care, which basically means that we can do whatever we want out there, within reason. Mostly, we just have a couple joints and play video games. The place that Spencer lives in is a very, very small wooded area, known locally as 10 Mile. And it has its share of spooky stories, including a satanic church about a mile away from Spencer's place. One that was often brought up was something called the Big White Thing. Supposedly, it's 9 feet tall and white. It was sort of like a Sasquatch-type character that was blamed, in jest, for a few strange incidents of literally disassembled deer. However, we always knew it was an urban legend. Also, a side note, while I've read my fair share of stories over the years, especially of the goat man type, I had never gone camping, and I didn't think that we'd actually run into anything. But anyways, back to the actual story. It was about 8 p.m. when we got all of our stuff to the campsite. Spencer and Jake get a fire going as Sam and Shane bust supplies back and forth from the entry into the woods. I begin to set up the tent. I should have started when we had more daylight, but of course, we're stoners. We just waste time laughing at each other and doing dumb stuff. But oh well. So right as I begin to single-handedly put up a 9-person tent, our friend Corey shows up. It turns out that he walked 9 miles of hilly road to get here. He wasn't even invited, and we don't even know how he found out. I tell him to get his lazy ass over here and help me. He tries, but of course, he's too tired, he says, to do much of anything. So I think, okay, screw it. I'll go Bear Grylls on this, and I decide to put it all up myself. As the sun falls, Spencer gets the call that more weed is on its way. Spencer, Jake, Sam, and Shane all leave to go get it, leaving me here with fat-ass Corey. His phone has a bright-ass flashlight though, so I'm not going to complain too much. We're alone. It's about 9 o'clock, and it's pitch black without the flashlight. And then some stuff starts to happen. So about 20 minutes in, his phone just randomly dies from an allegedly full charge. So here I am, single-handedly pitching a big-ass tent in the dark with no one here to keep me company except for Man-Tits McGee. I sort of hear sticks break around the clearing that we're in. Several times, it sounded like they were headed back with the weed. Each time I stand up and go, "Spencer?" Then I listen a few minutes. I get no response, and I go back to the tent. I start to notice a dead smell. I figure that it might be dead fish that washed up on the edge of a nearby lake. It goes away after about 30 minutes, so I just don't worry about it anymore. So at about 10:30, I finally get the tent up. I throw all my stuff in there and lie down, hoping that they're back soon enough. We continue to hear what sounds like the group coming back, yet each time, it's nothing. The smell comes back 5 minutes after we get in the tent. I figure it's just a musty-ass tent. It was in my basement after all. And then I start to feel real uneasy. I play Shine On You Crazy Diamond on my iPod. It calms my nerves for a bit. Eventually, I close the tent door because I really just don't feel safe. And then 45 minutes after this, they finally show up. I have no idea what took them so long, but I felt relieved. We smoke a joint, we get high for a few hours, and everything is fine. The possibility of some kind of cryptid or a goat man is on my mind at this point, but I keep telling myself it's just bullshit from the internet and it's not real. So fast forward some more. 2:30 in the morning rolls around. We're all outside the tent at this point. We're roasting chicken dogs around a pretty good fire. The smell is kind of gone, but I also may just not have been thinking about it. I go to take a piss like 30 or 40 feet from the group, facing the pitch black darkness of the woods with my dick in my hand. I start to flip in my head for some reason. All of a sudden, I see something. Sort of like that scene in Signs, where the alien walks past the birthday party. It's basically just a flash of white, but it's so bright in contrast to everything else that I sort of make out a human figure walking behind 2 bushes. This is too much for me. I zip my fly and book it back to camp. I start awkwardly laughing and tell my friends that I saw the big white thing. We all have a laugh. The smell is overwhelming to me, but it seems like I'm the only one that notices it now. I just pretend that everything's cool, though I've been scared out of my wits and out of my high. I'm constantly hearing sticks breaking and watching my back. It's now around 4 a.m. Jake, Spencer, and Corey have crashed. Me, Sam, and Shane are all still up. They usually stay up this late on weekends, but for me, I'm just up because I'm scared as hell. We all bullshit around and sneak 1 or 2 tiny bowls while the other guys sleep, but it doesn't do anything to me. The smell has honestly stopped bothering me. I just feel really creeped out. Sam and Shane are completely oblivious, and suddenly, I have to pee again. Shane does too, so he goes with me, and we go back to back about 15 feet from each other. I feel a little bit more confident that I'm safe. Time passes. The fire starts to burn away. It's time for more firewood. We all spread out around the campground. I'm on edge, but I don't want to come back empty-handed. Suddenly, I notice a different smell, kind of like sweat, but really old. I start picking up wood quickly. I try to think about heading back. All of a sudden I hear, "Spencer?" I freeze. I start looking around in all directions. I can barely see 5 feet in front of me, and it's all woods anyways. I start to go, "No, it's me, man," figuring that Sam or Shane mistook me for Spencer for some odd reason. And I'm met by dead silence. No crickets, no wind, no leaves or sticks. It sounds like a soundproof room. Right beside me, right in my ear, I hear, "Spencer?" I turn and book it back to camp. I start screaming and shit, trying to wake everybody up and get everyone in a group. We all get in the tent and zip it up. Everyone else is kinda pissed at me because I freaked them out. I tell them that I heard someone talking to me out in the woods. I tell them that it sounded just like my voice. I tell them about how I'd been feeling the whole night. They just tell me I'm crazy. Sam and Shane get back out of the tent. Everyone else just goes back to sleep. I get in my sleeping bag, but I'm not sleeping tonight. But after about a half hour, I'm starting to feel really tired. That exhaustion is coming on. It's around 5. I remember checking my phone. I've been fading in and out for 15 minutes. After momentarily regaining total consciousness, I notice that I only hear woods. There's no fire, and Sam and Shane aren't talking. Not 5 minutes later, Shane walks into the tent. It's dark, but Shane is fairly short, so I figure it's him. He sort of awkwardly stands up in the tent for a bit. I tell him to just lie down. I sort of whispered it. He does. I go back to drifting. About 10 minutes later, I hear boots running. Sam practically dives into the tent, but he doesn't manage to wake anybody up. Even Shane is fast asleep. Sam tells me that he heard talking too. He tells me that it began to mimic them. He tells me that they booked it. I point out that Shane got here quite a while ago and wasn't freaking out. he goes cold. I look over, and Shane is sleeping like a baby. Sam just lies down, not saying a word. I fell asleep. The rest of the night was calm. I wake up the next morning. Everything would appear to be fine. Me, Jake, and Spencer are the first ones out of our tent at around 7:30. I feel quite refreshed for some reason, like I just took the perfect power nap. We all smoke a cigarette. I tell them about the freaky stuff last night too. They reveal that they smelled everything as well. Jake attributed it to a dead animal out in the woods. Spencer attributed it to Corey's sweaty state. After the cigarette, we wake up Sam and Shane for a wake and bake. I pull Shane aside and ask for a cigarette, and then I pull him aside again, further from the group, and ask him if he had a rough night as well. He said yeah, that he and Sam heard some real freaky stuff out in the woods. He mistook it for me trying to catch up with them. Then, they said they saw something running through the woods. They ran back to the campsite. He says that he eventually got split up with Sam and didn't find the camp until an hour ago. I'm noping my ass off right now. He said that when he got to the tent, everyone was sleeping, so he just lied down. I told him that I was awake when he got into the tent, and that I said something to him. He said he didn't remember any of that, that when he got there, the tent door was open, and everyone was asleep. But he said he was also in a really shitty mental state, so it's possible that he got things mixed up. The rest of the day went fine, but I didn't sleep for the next week. There are woods like this all around my neighborhood. I haven't been in them since all this happened. To start, I live in Newfoundland, which is pretty rural wherever you go, so you don't even have to go very far outside of town to go camping. My family owns 100 acres on the beach, about an hour outside of town, and upward from the beach until you get to the highway. My great-grandparents were given the land when they relocated from an island across the bay from our cabins. It's 90 acres of dense forest and bog, with a single dirt road cutting through the middle until you make it down to the beach, and then there's about 10 acres of open field along the beach. The way our cabins are situated, they all lie on the edge of the forest in a horseshoe. There are 11 of them, with boathouses down on the water and a clear field in between. Up past the last cabin, there are a few outhouses for when the well dries up, which doesn't happen all the time, but the last couple of years, we've had some pretty global warmed summers, so the well's been drying up around August. All my great aunts and uncles own the other 10 cabins, so there's usually a bunch of people down there on any given night, but they're getting up there in age, so they're not as active as they used to be. This particular weekend, my parents, my brother and I, along with my great-uncle Norm's son and his kids, were the only people down there until Saturday night, when they had to go back into town for a hockey camp. Usually, there would be enough people to have a bonfire on the beach every night, but because it was only our family down there, we decided to have a small one in the fire pit next to our cabin instead. Probably around 11, my mom gets up to go to the outhouse, which I refuse to use because there are a ton of spiders in there, and the last time that I was in there, I found one crawling on me. A couple of minutes later, my mom comes back down to where we're sitting, which was really odd because it takes more than a minute to walk to the outhouse, so I jokingly said that it must have been the quickest trip of her life, but she didn't respond. When she gets closer to the fire, I saw the look of utter terror on her face. She was as white as a sheet. I asked her if a spider fell on her when she was in the outhouse, but she said that she didn't even get a chance to do anything in the outhouse, and started to cry. I was like, geez, that's gross, but you don't have to cry about it, until she cut me off and told me to shut up, which is weird, because she's not usually the type to snap at somebody like that. So my dad asks her what happened, what the problem is, and she tells us what happened when she walked up through the field. She had on one of those clip lights for a baseball hat, which are basically the worst flashlight in existence, and she told me that when she was walking up past the dirt road, she heard something rustling in the brush that was just off the dirt road. When she went to shine her light on it, the light didn't reach far enough to see exactly what it was, but it looked to be at least 4 feet tall, and it ran when the light was pointed at it, so she assumed it was a young caribou, because if it was a bear or a moose, they wouldn't be that fast, and she would have caught a better glimpse of it. So she kept on walking up past the dirt road, around 50 feet, to where the 4 outhouses are, and she went into the closest stall to do her business. While she's getting ready, she hears a metallic scraping sound coming from the woods. It was faint at first, but it started to get louder and louder. There's a derelict car about 30 feet off the road that one of my uncles crashed about 30 years earlier. She assumed that it was coming from there, but she had no idea what exactly could be making the noise, so she was starting to get pretty scared. She opened up the outhouse and just booked it as fast as she could until she was close to the cabin again, as she looked back over the field, but she couldn't see anything, so she sped walk up to the fire, and that's when we saw her return. And honestly, when she told us this, we all had a bit of laugh at her, actually. We told her that it was probably a tree scraping against the old car, and that she was over-exaggerating, but she insisted that she wasn't, and told my dad that she wanted to go into our cabin, and we were all getting pretty tired of just sitting around the campfire anyways, so we all decided to go into the cabin and go to bed. My mom and dad went to their room, but me and my brother stayed up a little longer playing Pokemon until he fell asleep. After he fell asleep, I walked out into the dark living room and stumbled my way to the bathroom. I was facing the window when I entered the bathroom, and I could see something flickering in the bushes about 20 feet from the window, so I quickly turned on the light, and for a few seconds, the largest canine face was staring back at me, probably about 5 feet off the ground, with bright red eyes, and it just bared its huge fangs at me and darted off into the woods. Needless to say, I sure as hell didn't sleep that night. The next day, my dad went to check out the car, and he told me that the whole side of the car was gouged out with thick, deep scrapes, the whole length of the fenders and the side doors. He said the cuts are too deep to be a bear, so he thinks that someone was just playing a trick on my mom. Recently, I asked my uncle how he crashed the car 30 years ago, and he told me that he was driving down the dirt road one night after a late shift at the mill, when a wolf ran out into the road, and he swerved in the brush to avoid it. The car was still in working condition, but it was stuck in the boggy ground and not worth getting it towed out. The worst part of the story, we don't have wolves in Newfoundland. So I'm Australian, and you can make your jokes here, but I was about 26 at the point that this happened. I came into possession of a large rural property west of Torrey in Hunter Valley, and a very large chunk of cash after my grandfather's passing. After a while I decided, screw it, I'm going to settle out there, and I'm going to become relatively self-sufficient. It was also just to be alone, to be honest, and be left alone by other people. So I bought some chickens, some goats, and just for fun, just because I was able to, a mule. I ended up loving this creature beyond all belief. He was already saddle trained by the time I got him. I named him Jack. Fast forward a few months, I was a part of an equestrian hiking club up in the Blue Mountains. I was kind of an oddball though, since most of the other members of the group that I usually ride with were young girls and their ponies, normally alongside one or both of their parents. It was like this all except for our supervisor or guide, Noah. He was an Aboriginal guy with a rough-cut water horse named Steel. Most hikes would usually end up with me sticking to the back of the pack and talking with Noah. This goes on for a few months. I was practically a supervisor myself after a while. I was often asked to help out with issues on the road, usually pulling younger riders up on their rein and saddle or foot positions or de-spooking other horses. I come to really appreciate how calm and collected that my mule is in comparison. Noah ends up trusting me immensely. He can see that I have my life together. He asks me if I would want to come on a multi-day trip through the national park up past Nunes Plateau with another group. And I thought this would be a good time to be around some more experienced riders. And I was right. I made preparations. I get there with Jack. I was greeted by Noah and a bunch of older, much more experienced riders with actual full-sized horses. This goes off without a hitch for the first day. Cut to that night, everyone's hitched their animals, and we've set up camp for the night. So fast forward again to 2 a.m. Being a light sleeper, I am immediately aware that something has severely spooked one of the horses. I hear stamping, whining. The horse is making a real scene. All the other horses were awake, whickering nervously at each other. I get out there, since I realize that nobody else is going to. I get a little bit spooked myself, as the horses don't seem to calm down right away, even with my methods. It starts kicking behind itself. I grab a flashlight, and I check behind it. I hear sort of a tromping scuttle from whatever it was, and I see leaves being kicked up from the upper corners of my flashlight. I assume that it was just a wombat or a swamp wallaby or something like that. Definitely sounded like one too, and they're both pretty common around here anyways. After this, I do go back to my camp, and I wake up tired, as per usual. Noah tells everyone that this is going to be the longest part of the trip, and it will likely take until the late evening to get to the next campsite. I saddle up Jack, and we get on with it. We're walking all day. There's a couple of pit stops for water and breaks. The sun starts setting as we get relatively close to the next site. Jack starts acting up in the middle of the trail. I only just noticed that he had picked up a load of ticks on one of his feet and legs. This was on the same foot that he busted a shoe a few days before the trip, and he was still getting used to the new one. I tell Noah that I have to deal with this. He wants everyone to stop. I urge him onwards, and I tell him that I won't be long, that the trail's obvious from here. He trusts me enough to know what I'm doing, but pleads with me to not get lost along the way. He says that he'd leave a fire or something going so I could find them, so I get to picking. Somehow, I didn't notice that Jack apparently had a small nick across from his hoof, which is what attracted all of the ticks. I pick out all the ticks from his leg. I clean his wound with antibacterial wipes and check his shoe. All of this takes maybe about 20 minutes, but it was 20 minutes that we didn't have. The sun was just barely there now. I could only just barely see the trail. I was looking for the light of a fire or something up ahead, but there was nothing. Inevitably, we took a wrong turn. We wandered up the side of a mountain for 15 minutes, not knowing where the hell we were going. And then Jack suddenly, in the middle of what was supposedly the trail, gives a quick snort and abruptly stops. His ears are pricked directly forwards. I give him a tap and try to get him to move forward a bit, but nothing. I gently tug on his reins to get him to focus. Nothing. He's completely seized up. I know this animal very intimately, and I know that he only does this if something has really spooked him. I start to feel very uneasy myself. I pull on his reins a little harder. Jack turns his head very slightly toward me, only just enough that I can see the whites of his eyes are fully exposed. I was scared now. And then suddenly there's a small rustling that is heard in front of us. Jack snaps his head forward again, splays his front feet slightly. I keep talking to him softly, and patting his haunches, trying to calm him down. In reality, I think I was trying to reassure myself more than the mule. Suddenly, I become blisteringly aware of something. The silence. Complete and utter silence. No owls or possums calling out. No frogs. No crickets even. Nothing but my own slightly labored breathing. I hear a small rock get dislodged behind us. Jack flinches and starts slowly stepping back. Instantly, I hear that same tromping scuttle that I heard before coming at us from behind and in front, and then Jack loses it. He makes a sound I have never heard come from an animal before or since. He jumps a full foot in the air with a sprawling, rear-legged kick, almost completely throwing me from the saddle. He bolts down the mountain at breakneck speed. Meanwhile, during that jump, one of my boots gets caught in the stirrup iron. I'm now being dragged over jagged rocks down a mountain at immense speeds by my left leg that's still attached to the saddle of a terrified mule. Despite protecting my head with my arm, I'm still acutely aware that the scuttling sound is still directly next to us. I can barely see anything. It's almost completely dark, only just enough to make out leaves and rocks that are being kicked up about a meter next to us. Somehow, it's managing to keep pace. I'm desperately trying to make purchase on anything I can to try and pull myself back up onto the saddle. I managed to somehow grab onto what I can only assume was the saddle flap and hoist myself up just a little bit. It was a bad idea. My arm, protecting my head, makes violent contact with a massive rock pointing at the ground. My wrist gets immediately dislocated. It hurt so bad. Not a moment after, the scuttling to my side gets much louder, and I can feel what I can only picture to be a talon strike the side of my head, making a deep cut just above my temple. One might assume that it was another rock, but rocks don't cling to the place that they cut you. Jack cries out and almost tramples me, trying not to trip over himself. I was resisting the urge to crap my pants. I somehow managed to flail my body upwards enough to give me enough clarity to grab onto the saddle's pommel without my legs slipping through the stirrup and hoist myself back up with one hand. Basically, I was clinging to Jack for dear life now. My face keeps getting whapped by tree branches as we finally manage to reach the bottom of the mountain, directly into the camp that we were trying to find the whole time. I didn't even notice the light of the bonfire that we were rushing towards. I had my head down, focusing on the trees and the ever-impending and ever-closing in scuttling that was next to us on both sides. Jack also apparently didn't expect this, as when he suddenly hit flat ground after the downwards incline, he completely toppled over, now fully throwing me from my saddle and into the hard stony dirt below. Jack was fine. I was not. He got up almost immediately, kicking and braying and spooking all the other horses and sending everyone in the camp into a panic. I just writhed there for a moment, winded and in a lot of pain, just trying to get up and run. Noah rushes to me, hands all over me, trying to set me right. In his defense, I did in fact have blood streaming from the side of my head. I was covered in deep scratches, and I had a limp wrist. I managed to wheeze out, "Hand me a flashlight." "A flashlight? You need a doctor." I yelled out again, "Hand me a flashlight." I could still hear them. The scuttling, the rustling. It was still there, pacing around the camp. The spooked brays and squeals of the horses and the concerned babbling of people in the camp almost seemed muffled in comparison to the sound of what I knew was there, pacing around the edges of the fire's light. I got handed my flashlight. I could hear one of them, not 10 meters away. I shined my light directly at where I knew it was and find nothing. A flurry of leaves and small twigs were kicked up as it skittered up the small gully like it was a frightened lizard, but there was nothing, no form to be seen. I turn off my flashlight and I turn to Noah. I say, "We can't stay here tonight." He says, "What do you mean? What did you do?" I stand up and look him dead in the face. "We can't stay here tonight." I don't actually remember much after that. I know that Noah patched me up and acted very creeped out. We were actually forced to stay there for the night, but I refused to let anyone douse the fire, and everyone and their horses were up all night. Everyone blamed me for being tired the next morning and having to cut the trip short so I could get proper medical attention. I didn't care. All I remember doing is sitting on a log, listening to those things circle our camp until sunrise, and then spending about 4 days in a hospital while my brother took care of Jack. Obviously, I haven't been back there since, but I still go riding with Jack. Way back when I was 16 or so, me and my family had just moved to a small rural town in Washington state. This was a huge culture shock from San Francisco, where I grew up. Most of the people here were rednecks. Most of them drove gas guzzler trucks instead of small cars. Despite these differences, I did make a few friends and a few really cute girls. And some of the guys became really great friends too. We all decided to go camping pretty far in the woods. There's this lake and a trail that we go a few days ahead of time to scout out our location a little ways off of the main trail. It involves a little bit of hiking, but not enough so that you're super tired by the time you get there. The camping spot that looked like it would be perfect for us was behind a barbed wire fence that said no trespassing, but being really stupid teenagers, we thought that we were indestructible, that we were above the law, and that nothing was going to happen to us. So we all gather some food in a disposable cooler. We buy our drinks and drugs and bring sheets to lay on and wood for the fire, normal camping stuff for the middle of the summer. The day of, we wait until just after dark, go pick up the girls, and then get on our way. We get there and set up our stuff, and everyone seems to be having a great time. The fire's going. A few people are smoking and having some drinks. I decide to stay sober because I drove us all out here, and I want to be able to drive us all the way back at the ass crack of dawn. There's a really cute girl who starts getting a little paranoid. 1, because it was a no trespassing area, and 2, it was a no burn night, and she was saying that we shouldn't be having a fire. She complains about it enough that we eventually let the fire die down and stop adding to it. The fire gets real low, and it's pitch dark, and randomly, everyone gets quiet. The music on the speaker stops. It's the end of the song, and the end of the playlist. Everyone's quiet, and then someone says that we should keep talking because the paranoid no-burn girl is probably going to flip for some other reason. The weird kid of the group says that he needs to use the bathroom, so he just walks off into the trees to go take a pee. So fast forward, and he hasn't come back. We're thinking that maybe the food made his stomach upset, so we just let him be. But then, before we know, it's been 3 hours, and we still haven't seen him. I'm completely sober at this time, just a reminder. The girl stops talking again. She's staring off behind me. Another girl starts whispering about how she also saw the bushes move. I'm thinking that the 2 girls are just paranoid because they've been smoking, but she swears to God that she saw something in the bushes, and then another one chimes in and says that she saw some dark thing standing on the rock behind me, just standing there, staring. Another guy was like, maybe we should just get out of here. The other guys in the group agree, saying that they don't feel like staying the night, especially if everybody's going to be paranoid, and especially if there's something out there. We pack up almost everything. We leave the sheets and just grab a cooler of beer and leftover hot dogs. One of the girls is crying by now. She says that she swears that she saw something and that she just wants to go home. Someone else says, "Where's Travis? He never came back yet." And this is a moment where I did something regrettable. I decided to leave anyways. So we start hiking back to the trail. Nobody can see anything, but we all came to the conclusion to not use flashlights because we're all starting to think that there is something out there, and that whatever it was could follow us if we used flashlights. We let our eyes adjust, and as we're hiking, the girl who was always paranoid is sobbing and blowing her nose on the sleeve of my sweater by now. We make it back to the trail, and I stay behind to do a head count as everyone passes. Everyone's here, but that Travis guy. I really should have waited for him or went back to look for him, but I didn't. And then I heard something. Bushes rustling behind me. I tell every drunk kid in the group to hurry their asses up, that the car is in sight. I still have the urge to not look behind me, scared of what I might see. One of the girls looks behind me and starts wailing, but she stops long enough to point out a disgusting smell. And for some reason it takes me a few seconds to really realize what she's talking about, but then I do smell it, and I wonder how I didn't before. It smelled awful, like rotting meat. If there was anything like this, especially like a dead animal, we probably would have known. Me and the friends and the whole group scouted the place out before we even came here for the night. Some folks are close enough to the car, and they start loading up. I'm still on the trail. The trail is a sort of paved type of biking trail. I can make out the sound of bare feet behind me. It reminds me of when you get out of the pool and you kind of waddle over to your towel across the concrete. The feet sounded wet. I come to terms with the fact that the paranoid girl wasn't just paranoid. There is literally something behind me. I run to the car and I pile all the kids in, -1, Travis. I get in the driver's seat, lock the doors, and turn on the headlights. Briefly, for a few seconds, I can make out a white blob of a thing. It had long arms that were bended up toward its chest, receding on the trail that we just left. It's at this point I realize the reality of everything and think, oh shit, we could have died. Everyone is just quiet. The girl that I brought is just sniffling. That thing looks almost human, but not. It's hunched over. It's naked, and all of its limbs are too long. Its head is too long. I automatically think about all those crazy stories that I have been reading on the internet. Those ones that I always thought were a whole bunch of bullshit and didn't have even a sliver of truth to them. But here it is, right in front of me. As soon as I realize this, I speed out of there with 6 underage drunk kids in the back seat. We end up crashing at a girl's place closer to town, really far away from that spot. I didn't sleep at all. I stayed up all night comparing my experience to everyone else that was there. 2 days later, a friend calls me up and asks me if I heard from Travis. I said no, and even still, at that point, as bad as it sounds, I didn't really care. This friend says that we need to go check out the campsite and see if he's there or not, because they haven't heard from him either. I get sudden chills. They convince me to go. We go in the middle of the day. There's hikers and bikers all over the trails, so we're safe in case we see anything or anything happens. We get to our campsite. Things are messy because we left in a rush. The white sheet I brought is bunched up in the corner near a pile of wood. We didn't do that. My friend starts poking around, searching the area that Travis went to piss. I open up the sheet, and one corner of it is covered in blood, kinda smeared, like someone wiped their mouth or their hands off or something. I'm freaked out. I drop the sheet and shout at my friend. I tell him that I suddenly don't feel well and we have to leave. Walking back on the trail, we pass a few bikers. We still smell that awful smell. It's following us. We ran back to the car, and I have never been back, but others have been. And yes, Travis did make it out. I heard from a friend who has a cousin who's friends with Travis. Travis was absolutely pissed that we left him out there that night, but also said something weird happened to him. When he went out to use the bathroom, he kept hearing someone walking around him. He thought that it was one of us, so he walked further into the woods. And then, in the middle of using the bathroom, he said that something hit him. He came to in the middle of the night. He was 2 miles away, in the dark. Somehow, he got very lucky and managed to find his way back to the trail. From there, he wandered around through the woods all night, before just around daybreak finding our camp. He stayed there until 2 cyclists found him very early in the morning. They said he was disoriented, very dehydrated, and had a mild concussion. He has no idea about anything that we saw in the forest, and he didn't want to talk to any of us ever again, so he switched schools to a charter school and graduated there. I don't know what the hell we saw in the woods that night. I don't know what it was that hit Travis, but I do feel bad about it all.